Hello everybody and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and today, well, not exactly today, but we are at the beginning of October, which means that Silmarillion development will be picking up once again. So today we're going to be playing on our patch, our closed test patch. This is not a public build this time around, but it will be a good chance to ask questions about the new patch, about the new faction Gondolin that will almost certainly be in it. And I've decided to call this patch the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, which is after one of the great battles in the north of Silmarillion during the period of the First Age, in which the mod takes place. That does not mean that we will be doing a scenario about the Nirnaeth. That will come in due time, but for now that's just the name of the patch. So if there's a little bit of confusion there, and you're not seeing the massive apocalyptic showdown between good and evil, well, that would be why. Today I've got a 1v1. We'll be playing some more games with our testers as more of them become available. It's a little bit of an odd hour for streaming. I'm a bit later getting online than I wanted to be, since there was a lot of changes that had to be made from the test patch that we released yesterday. But this will also be the patch that you're going to see the Old Timers tournament streamed on and played in and replays, etc., etc. And that will be starting probably today for some of the games, but most likely a lot of people will be playing tomorrow, and that will take place over most of the weekend. And then it will continue in as long as people have time. So, yeah, just should be a few more minutes here before Celtic manages to ready up. And it's going to be Celtic versus Arnoediad, who are two really good players, and it's going to be, I think, a real treat to see them go at each other today. There we go, it's ready up. A little bit of Nasmith artwork there, very, very 80s. I think that is supposed to be Twar. We're going to be goofing around just as Sauron. We're going to pop ourselves off to a corner somewhere and just observe. In the meantime, let's chit-chat, see how they're doing. And we're going to copy our link here. We're going to start deployment. We'll have some time before... Turn our sound down a little bit so it's not too oppressive. We're going to start that battle. In the meantime, we'll link our stream in the usual places, try and pull some extra people in here. But yeah, it is very exciting to be kind of back and working on things again. There's going to be a lot of visual and mechanical and gameplay things to look forward to in this patch. New animations, for one. We're going to be adding some slingers into Gondolin for the House of the Tree. Things like that. Weapon upgrades. That's also something we can do. So you'll be able to upgrade a weapon and see that reflected in the model the same way that you do when you upgrade the armor for certain units. See if they start yet. No, it'll probably be a little while. I think they're going to take their time with it. How's it going, Matt? Thanks for joining me. Damn dog looks pretty good. Thank you, Umut. Am I saying that correctly, Umut? Are you just joining us for the first time? If so, if you have any questions about the mod, things to come in the future, kind of how it plays, by all means pose them in chat and I will answer them to the best of my ability. So today we're going to be playing on what we're calling the mod the Anfauglith map, but this is actually the dry lake bed that's been imported over from Reforged. Got a little bit of extra vegetation here, as we do use the vegetation from Europa Barbarorum, which is fantastic work, and they deserve all the credit and praise in the world for it. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's a nice little sandy map here. And the Easterlings in particular are going to draw some bonuses from the sandy terrain. I can't quite remember who Artorias will be playing as. He might be playing as Doriath. He could also be playing as Angband, in which case both armies will get fairly noticeable bonuses from fighting in this sandy terrain. In Silmarillion Total War, terrain bonuses are not massive. They're not really anything higher in most cases than like 2 extra damage, but it does make a difference. So let's take a look at Artorias' army here. We've got some Guardians of the Iron Crown on the wing here. They're a armor-piercing mace unit, and behind them we're going to have some of the Iron Crown Spear Guard. The typical sort of Angband backline composed of their crossbowmen. Got some bulldogs in there as well. And the crossbowmen are a pretty essential part of the Angband skirmish line. In fact, they are the entirety of it, and very important for dealing with certain heavily armored targets, such as those from the House of Finarfin, for example. The pike units there can be very difficult to address without those skirmishers on your second line. Front line composed mostly of legionnaires and some iron-shot halberds as well, looking like they all have their armor upgrades. More spear guard and Guardians going to be out here on the wings. And then we have a final set of reserves here composed of Wretches of Angband and some Ravagers of the... actually, those are just Iron-shot Ravagers. Now, Celtic's army, he does favor the more fluid kind of kiting gameplay, which might be difficult when you're in kind of like a bowl like this. There's only limited terrain, especially in 1v1s, and it can be difficult to kite for as long as you need to get the value from your missile units. But he's going to be playing as the Easterlings. We've got 2 units here of the Salamandrine Guard. Made a little bit more... they have a little bit more endurance than they do over the current live patch. They've got the very hardy trait as opposed to the hardy trait, so they'll be able to run around out here pretty well for days on end and not get too tired. But they're a horse archer unit and also a melee cavalry that is armor piercing. I think he's got some of the Eastron horse archers mixed in here somewhere. Yeah, we're gonna see them right over here coming out through this hole here in the Angband defenses in force, but they are kind of trapped in a boxed canyon, so this could be pretty ugly, especially if he can't get through there on time. We've got the Guardians of the Iron Crown and the Spear Guard of the Iron Crown bearing down upon them. And there we go, they're going to be able to rush through there, but there's a big, long column of them. I don't think they're all going to escape. But having them behind Artorias' line is going to be essential for the particular playstyle that Celtic likes to employ. I have seen him play in Silmarillion tournaments before, largely as a Sidiand, but I think we're going to see a similar sort of tactic here, where you surround your enemy with cavalry, shoot them basically as much as you can, deny frontal engagements, which I think is going to be fairly important here, as the Angband armies do tend to employ high numbers of troops. He needs to wear all of that down before he's ready to engage, given the amount that he's invested into his skirmishing line. That being said, he does have a decent amount of infantry here. So we can have some Ravagers of Himring. These are a Loch Morale Falx unit. The Falx is a unique weapon type to the Easterlings. It doesn't do anything particularly amazing in terms of extra melee defense or armor piercing, but what it does have going for it is a huge charge value of 225% of that unit's total base damage, which means that a unit like this here, which is only mid-tier, has about 22 or so charge bonus, which is stacks on top of a 10 base value. So they hit really hard off the charge, and they're very, very quick as well. We have some Easteron Warband out here. This is from the Boar sub-faction within the Easterlings. That's just a little bit of a lore distinction there. So the black armored troops are from the Easterlings of Ulfang, the 2 distinct tribes that both came into Beleriand around the same time, whereas these guys here are from the Boar sub-faction, the faithful Easterlings who stayed true to their allegiance to the Sons of Feanor and their Noldor allies. Got some Sons of Ulfang here. More of a numbers-focused bodyguard. However, unlike the other Falx units, they have armor piercing. So not only do they have high base damage as a result of being a bodyguard unit, but their charge value is absolutely off the chain. And they hit like total trucks. This is not something that you want to let get its charge bonus off. If you can, deny it to them, and you will certainly serve you well. Got some more of that Warband here, and some more of the Loch Morale Falxmen. And this is the high tier variant. They are not Loch Morale, but they do cause fear, and their base stats are a little bit higher. Got some Halberdiers of Lochland here as well. Polearm unit, have that spear wall from the front, which is a very potent force multiplier. And of course, their armor piercing being halberd units. So a big old line here. Let's see what's going on. Looks like some early fire here from the Salamandrines. They have a powerful projectile that actually affects the morale of the units that they hit, but it is quite limited in its ammunition, and also just looks damn cool. See him showering the rear of the Angband army here as they move to circle the wagons and get as many of their shielded troops facing towards the enemy as possible. And those lighter horse archers here at the back, taking pot shots probably at the crossbowmen. And the crossbowmen have about 6 armor, and that's 6 missile damage coming their way, so there's a very good chance there to cut them down. Artorias is kind of helpless in the face of this particular tactic, as Angband does not have a ton of mobility. What they do have going for them is heavy armor and shield values, and of course numbers, and that's what they're going to be relying on to try and soak this damage. But while we're waiting here, I want to take a look at chat and see how everyone's doing today. Today, will we see the Narog? Absolutely. I will try and get that into the stream today for sure. Just send it to me again on Discord, or pop it into the map channel so that everyone who needs it can find it easily. Check my Discord. I will do that. Oh, it looks like you got it figured out there, Delramore. A little bit of movement here on the front line, and this is one of the advantages of playing this sort of kiting build and having these long spaghetti lines here, is that this double mangonel doesn't count for nearly as much. Mangonels are particularly potent, and we've seen that in a few videos and streams now, when you're able to use a rush army in particular's mobility against them, or perhaps to exploit the lack of mobility of an army like the House of Finarfin, who don't really have a ton of cavalry. They're mostly actually entirely a foot-based army, with some heavy infantry that can't really keep pace. So they're kind of at your mercy, but here, got this long line, not really trying to like stack up a formation, and therefore the mangonel is of fairly limited usefulness. It'll be interesting to see how this goes, as this is a build that Artorias is fairly proud of, stacking the mid-tiers of the Angband faction instead of going for some of their potent monster units. For example, like the Balrogs, the Uduloki, and things like that. This is mostly orc units, and it's very, very numbers focused. But one of the things that Angband does sometimes struggle with is morale shocks. Outside of the Iron Crown units, all of their units have a fairly poor response to morale shocks, so losing large numbers of units very, very quickly, losing a general, etc., etc. So they can break and run if you manage to catch pockets of them, and that's a very good way to dismantle an Angband army such as this, or by sniping their general, for example. Let's see if we can find the Bulldogs. I imagine they're well hidden and well protected over here at the front line, and the Bulldogs themselves can upgrade their armor, and they have multiple HP, so not an easy thing to do, but if you can clip the general, then this kind of army can fall apart extremely quickly. Alright, let me just pop the stream here into the Silm Discord as well, which is something I don't think I've done just yet. Artorias slowly moving forward, trying to get his mangonels into position where he can fire, but Celtic is quite wisely pulling himself out of range and allowing his horse archers time to do their thing. And look at this, they're very bold. They'll run right up to the back of the army, very, very close as they can get without getting caught. continue to pick on important targets, such as Artorias' ranged units. Which is a good idea, because it does leave Artorias completely at his mercy, but it will eat up a little bit of ammunition. So the trick there is having enough ammunition left in order to accomplish your tactical goals. That's a big, long, scary line. Hard to address. A lot of halberds here. A lot of spearmen. It seems to be... This is where kind of the big damaging strike is going to come from. The halberds hit very hard. They're really only held back by the fact that they are expensive and low in number. And these Ravager units here and these high-tier Falxmen can be a real nightmare, especially off the charge. And in support of a halberd block, that's a pretty nasty 1-2 punch. Sons of Wolfang now shifting onto that wing, and this, yeah, appears to be a strategy. Smash through one section of Artorias' army, using cavalry, using those powerful damaging infantry, and then just hold over here, where the rest of the Loch Morale troops and the defensive spearmen are located. Halfway back here. Salamandering Guard out of ammunition, looking like they are, of course, something to be feared in close quarters as well. They have a unique weapon type, the Kopesh or Kopis, however you want to say it. I'm sure I'll get shit for it either way. And in the mod, they have a Monster Hunter trait that is conferred by the Kopesh, and also armor piercing. Not really true to the nature of a Kopesh, whatever you want to say, in real life, but it does help make the unit a little bit unique, and it does specialize them towards roles of hunting monsters. Or being potent melee cavalry. So these guys are kind of just all-round specialists, whereas these cavalry in the back here, who are looking like they're now out of ammunition as well. There's a lot of dead orcs on the field here. They're more of a damage-focused, light-range cavalry. And their charge bonus is pretty negligible, and their combat stats are as well, but at least they have numbers that could potentially be potent in shock attacks against Angband, which can certainly bear fruit. Looks like a lot of the defensive portion of Celtic's army is going to fall back here. He's going to try and go for a big, ugly surround if he can. I hope it works. This mid-tier heavy build of Artorias is notoriously difficult to defeat, so it'd be nice to see it get what's coming to it in this match. Do you have to put the Narog map somewhere else as well? Nope, that'll be fine. I'll download it from there, and I will also point other people in that direction as well. Artorias trying to keep the rest of his line together. All of his halberds, except for one phalanx unit here, seem to be composing the front line. So if he gets into a frontal engagement against the halberds of Lothlan, it's going to be pretty tough for Angband. They're particularly vulnerable to, as I said, morale shocks, but also to armor piercing. Being one of the factions in the mod that relies on their armor piercing more than just about any other, or their armor rather, more than any other defensive stat. Do I like Synthwave? I just like Dance with the Dead. But, you know, I could try some Synthwave. This is one of those chess match games where a lot of things get decided in the movement phase rather than the actual combat. And it's a shame that Artorias doesn't have some more mobile elements to his army, because this here is quite separated from the rest of the Easterling force. Could be some opportunity here if he had a little bit of mobility to try and pick off pockets of these troops, or at least try and draw them into a pitched battle by attacking part of the army. but that's not something he's able to do today. Sacrifice mobility for range superiority in the form of his artillery pieces, which he hasn't even been able to use once here, as Celtic is deftly staying out of range of the potentially devastating mangonel fire volleys. Can't wait for the new elven statues and buildings. Neither can I. For those of you that are unaware, we will be releasing, as a gift from part of the Reforged team and from the Silmarillion team, a map asset pack with a bunch of Halloween-themed assets that are drawn from Battle for Middle-earth 2. So keep your eyes on our ModDB, which I can show you right now. And that should hopefully be available for you within about a week or so. That's my my personal goal. And if you guys are interested in joining us on stream for Silmarillion games, or possibly getting involved in the testing side of thing and the mod development, I will also put a link in the chat there to our wonderful Discord. Also an opportunity to get involved in the community roleplay campaign and other such things. Yeah, Celtic is covering quite a lot of ground here, whereas Artorias needs to stay together. It's sort of like a Rome versus Parthia battle, where the strength of Artorias' army lies predominantly in his infantry, whereas a lot of the scarier elements of the Easterling army are certainly ones that can be deadly to the Angband way of warfare, are these more mobile elements here, and they do have some infantry, but largely they're supported by cavalry, and especially horse archers in particular. A little bit of movement here. More fencing as these light units rush through the pass. They could get into the back of, say, some of these crossbowmen, for example. It looks like maybe Artorias doesn't see it. But if they can get into the back of those crossbowmen, a rear charge doesn't matter that they have low charge and low attack values. They will still run those units down. And that'll be the end of the crossbows. Mangonels are in a decent spot. They could probably hit some of these units here, maybe get a little bit of value off. I think they're within range, so maybe Celtic underestimating the range of the mangonel fire, maybe just wants to bait some of the ammunition. We'll see what happens. Will there be further building expansions after the Halloween one? It really does depend on time. If I have time, I will do one for Christmas, because my two favorite holidays of the year are Halloween and Christmas. But I wouldn't expect things for like minor holidays like Valentine's Day or something like that, right? But there's a possibility of a Christmas one. I'd say there's a strong possibility even. Mangonel fire just... Oh, here we go. Missed it, but that Mangonel managed to toast a number of those light infantry. It is somewhat mitigated by the fact that he's in a very long, loose formation. He's got these spaghetti lines going on here, which is perfect for mitigating artillery fire. And hopefully the Sons of Wolfang didn't get clipped. That would be bad news indeed. It's looking like mostly Ravagers here. Nicely toasted on the ground. And a few of the Warband of Lothland as well. And with that minor success, looks like Artorias is going to very confidently move forward here and look for another solid firing solution for his mangonels. Some more cav movement here. Salamandrine Guard being brought behind the lines to supplement the Easteron Horsemen. And this could be Celtic setting up for an attack run. One potential way to mitigate the mangonel fire once and for good is to take a frontal engagement. They have a minimum firing arc, so they won't be able to hit into units on the front lines if they're too close, or if they're obscured by too many friendly troops as well. So we may be seeing Celtic set himself up for an attack here. And we can see the more damaging elements being brought forward as well. They've effectively switched positions at this point. They've done a little bit of a dance all the way around this basin. And now Celtic's damaging forces are kind of marching through a graveyard of their own creation. Number of dead orcs on the ground there, but drop in the bucket when you're fighting against Angband. We'll see how this goes. More stuff equals better looking and more diverse maps. Yes, I agree. It's just a matter of having time, because, I mean, yeah, Silmarillion's lots of fun. I do spend a lot of time on it, and so does the rest of the mod team. But we also have, you know, lives outside of it, so we can't necessarily have big asset packs for every holiday. But the Halloween one will be substantial for sure. That'll have about 90 or so new assets, ranging from things like spider webs to skeletons to creepy abandoned lighthouses, etc., etc. Let's see what Celtic does here. A little bit of mangonel fire. Let's see if it actually manages to get anything. Ooh. It's a good thing he's got those very long, thin lines. Now, see, this is the nasty part. Yeah, they'll shift to reform their formation, and once these fires are on the ground, there's about 2 seconds where they are still lethal. So anything that is reforming the line and walks right into them, they're also going to go down. But so far he is baiting mangonel fire with some of his less important troops, so there are some Sons of Wolfang in here. No, never mind, that's just the Ravagers. These are the less important troops, but I think Artorias at this point is just trying to take what he can get. This will be interesting. You can kind of see what's being set up. Celtic wants to smash into Artorias' right wing, hit him with his cavalry at the same time, use his very good micro, and leverage as many shock attacks against the Angband infantry who don't stand up to that sort of thing very well, and try and take advantage of that and maybe cause a mass rout here. Especially if he can clip the general. If he gets the bulldogs and then has like one good charge, one good engagement with a partial surround, we could see this Angband army begin to evaporate. Looks like maybe Artorias is going to separate some of his army. And Celtic, in response, is just going to peel back his wing again here. I personally think that this looks like a pretty good engagement. The Warband of Lothlan, especially with if there's any general or support units nearby, they will be sturdy for quite a while. And the Ravager second line is, of course, Loch Morale. So they're not going anywhere until every single one of those units are dead. This seems like as good of an opportunity as any to engage the Angband army on relatively favorable ground. But I dare say the Celtic knows his business better than I, so we'll see what he's planning here. The elite troops getting perilously close to the Angband lines, but there are cavalry nearby to support, so anything that tries to detach and engage them is going to meet with a very, very quick and ugly end. Solid maneuvering here from both players. Artorias is quite experienced at the mod, and he hasn't really given Celtic an opportunity to charge elements of his army. He hasn't given chase. It's been a very ordered and deliberate pursuit so far. And Celtic is, of course, playing very well himself. Might just be kind of tightening the noose here a little bit, and we'll see the Easterlings begin to clash with that Angband spear wall. It is formidable, though. There's a lot of orcs and a lot of heavy armor there. Looks like the Mangonel being turned around now and going after some really high value targets. Now I think is the moment. We're going to see the rest of this army begin to surge forward here. I think they're going to go in for the kill and try and get under that Mangonel firing arc before it's too late. No movement from over here just yet. These Sons of Wolfang? Yep. Oh, yeah, that's what they're going after. So the thing about the manga now, though, you don't want to target the lead unit. If you can target something behind it, you're far more likely to hit what you actually want. Yeah, cooking some of the halberds here. Again, you can see that momentum being used against the Easterling advance. Interesting to see what happens here. Halberds give them a distinct advantage. Even though there are a few halberds here, there, of course, is a serious quality difference. As stark as there is a number difference between the two units, the halberds of Lothline are very, very good, and they will blender these Angband units. What we got here? Spear guards, macemen. We'll see how these guys do without general support. Their morale is a little bit higher. I think it's about 14, 15. We'll see. This is going to be an ugly charge. Those macemen are really going to take it on the chin. Countercharge there from Artorias. As those macemen begin to collide, now the halberds are going to move in to back them up. Lower tier units beginning to move forward as well. Cavalry active, but not able to play a decisive role just yet. There are a lot of obstacles in the way. Ooh. Oh no! That's bad news. Yeah, I can see some of those troops get cooked there. I want a countercharge here from the spearmen. Generally, you don't want to countercharge with your spears, because they do have a trait that allows you to reflect charge damage back at your opponent, but only when they are braced, and that is stationary. Let's see. Bulldogs being positioned so that they can support this wing where the most damage is going to be done. Nice move on the part of Artorias. Just a little bit of preemptive support. Oh no, get out of there, Celtic. That countercharge from those axes would be devastating. More horsemen moving in. Got some salamandrines over here. There's a potential for some sandwiching. Maybe those aren't salamandrine guard. These are the salamandrines. Ooh, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt both sides here with that countercharge going off. Oh, there's a possibility of some routing though. Those Ravagers are gonna take it on the chin. Celtic is able to pick apart these defenses here on the back. The Ravagers do play a part as in sort of an anti-cavalry unit if you can get those charges off. Celtic trying desperately to rout them. Over here, these troops being overwhelmed just by the sheer ferocity. This is more of the holding part of the line, but let's see how he's doing with the damaging units. Not all that well. Although where the halberds are present, you can really start to see things thin out. These halberds are just so good against Angband. Possibility of a charge there from the Salamandrines. They're going to turn around and walk away, and I don't blame them. There is definitely a possibility here for a flanking attack. The Wretches have absolutely terrible morale response, worse than the average unit, and their morale is only about 10. So a solid attack here from the Salamandrine Guard, or from just about anybody else, would quickly see them run off the field. Oh no, do we have some routing here? Perhaps a little bit of reforming. Yeah, it looks like some reforming. Celtic is managing to hammer his way through part of Artorias' line. Over here, though, things aren't looking quite so good. There is sort of a mixing of the high and mid and low tier units, but it's not going quite as well for him. Those Wretches are going to move to cover here, but a rear charge or a flank charge. Oh. Let's see what we got going on. Yeah, they're not going to have time to brace, so they are going to take that on the chin. Some Ravagers mixed in there as well. Over here, things are quite dire. A lot of these units are either locked morale or have good staying power, so they are holding the rest of the Zangband force for as long as they're able to, and they have sort of managed to thin them out in places. But over here is where things are going to have to go well for Celtic, and so far they are not. The Easterlings kind of got shut down here a little bit. I think we might see this kiting army begin to fail in the face of the overwhelming numbers of the Angband force. That's a rough one. There are some other ways the Celtic could have played this. The Easterlings, for example, do have a lot of sort of mid-range throwing units that can be particularly potent against polearm units, or against some of the lighter units, opening up gaps in the line and things like that. Ravagers of Himring, I think, come to mind, or the Marauders of Himring, rather, come to mind, along with the Eastron Axemen, the lower tier Ulfang unit. Still, cavalry is looking reasonably healthy, but I don't think it's going to matter too much, as things are not going well for the Easterlings just about anywhere along that line. Angband is super hard to take on in a frontal engagement. Unfortunately, that's just how it be. And none of the tricks there were able to pay off for Celtic in this particular fight. And that massive Angband forces now just rolling up the line here. The Sons of Ulfang in serious danger of being swept away, although they are in quite low numbers at this point. Might not matter too much. They're not long for this world either way. Oh, those big macemen. See if the Suns can beat these macemen back. I don't think it's gonna happen though. Yeah, and the orcs are cleaning up what remains of these Easterling troops. I think the cavalry here is going to meet a sticky end. And down they go. What I'm going to try and do is take on Artorius's mid-tier build in our next fight here, and see if I'm not able to break down that brick wall. Definitely an interesting fight. I think what I'll try and do is take him on with the Easterlings, perhaps. And we'll see if I can't try a different approach. That will maybe get me a little bit farther, but who knows. It may just be a pretty rough engagement for the Easterlings, just generally. Halberds of Lothlan making a final stand here. Hacking some of these macemen to bits. They're going to be overwhelmed and ultimately flee in the face of Angband's overwhelming might. What do we got left? Oh, they're probably going after me. I'll admit defeat. Managed to kill off about half of the Angband army, but unfortunately wasn't able to penetrate those stout phalanxes. So let's see if we can't do a little bit better. Let's do it on War-Torn Plains. We'll do it on Talith-Dyrnan. Oops, not gonna be the Sons of Feanor. We're gonna try it as the Easterlings. Well, as Celtic is the only one playing today, in which case we'll play against him, but that's gonna be a long game, as Celtic, as I mentioned, does favor that more fluid playstyle. It's a little bit more about letting you kind of hang yourself a little bit by chasing and by breaking down your micro and picking off small elements of your army and things like that, which can be a little bit frustrating to play against, but it is also a difficult tactic to pull off because you're just as vulnerable as your opponent to making those micro mistakes and getting caught out. I think it might just be Celtic and I today. Unless we get someone else in here, in which case we'll do a 2v2, but... So we're going to take the Ballista here, and the Ballista does outrange the Mangonel, I believe by about 20 to 40 meters off the top of my head. So we do get to shoot first at least, which is helpful. And we're also going to need lots of Ravagers to kind of hold the line. We'll take one Salamandering Guard. We'll upgrade them. I think 2 artillery pieces might be a bit much. Maybe some Clan Guard here. We won't take the Salamanders. It does draw off a lot of our funds. So I will take some of those Spearmen. Some Axemen. And then I think we can afford some Salamanders as well. See if we can get something done with this. Might be able to at least neutralize the Mangonels. Oh, hi, Peak. How's it going, bud? And hello, Melcon. Welcome to the stream. Currently, we're trying to take on Artorius's mid-tier heavy build with a couple of Mangonels with the Easterlings, and I'm trying to devise some sort of counter to that and see if we can't get a little bit farther than Celtic was able to last time. It is a tough fight, though, for sure. Celtic is by no means an inexperienced player, so if he can't do it, then I might not fare too much better, but we'll see. These guys a little bit farther forward. Like so. My plan will be to try and fare a little bit better in a frontal engagement, rather than spreading myself out in the same way. I'll also have some light infantry reserves here. We're going to try and at least maybe bait some of that mangonel fire, if we can't outright destroy it. And we'll have, of course, mobile elements to our army we can use for some harassment. You guys can be two. The salamanders over in this direction. These guys in the center. Try and get something out of their charge value, but we may not be able to. I'll deploy these guys on the wings, like so. That will do for us. It's possible that he comes over this way and uses the fact that we can't deploy over here because there's the Finarfin deployment zone, but I think Artorias will maybe go through here. How are you? I see this mod's gone a long way. It looks delicious. I'm actually really well peaked. Thanks for asking, man. How's your school going, by the way? I know you've been quite busy with real life stuff, but it's good to have you back. But yeah, the mod's doing really well. We just released our latest build with the House of Engulfin faction, so that brings us up to 9 publicly released factions, and it had a big update for the Sons of Feanor as well. Oh Jesus, we're starting. This is kind of juicy right here. Move around that direction with our horsemen. Move up through here, perhaps. That's alright. They're allowed to shoot at those guys with the mangonel. In fact, that's what we need them to do. I'll catch one of the mangonels on fire. Go. Toasted 2 of those mangonels. Let's go back and get the other. Go. I'll carve its way through some of the legionaries at least. And you lot, we'll go back to being group 1. And we'll start to move you up in just a moment here. Okay, some weirdness. Move these guys over this direction, put them into close formation so they hold better. Bring these guys back this way. I'm going to bring our main line up here. Bring these guys forward. Shoot at that mangonel crew for a little bit. Oh, no, that's not what we want, is it? Let's take these guys around the back. What we're gonna do instead is come over this way, try and shoot at the rear of the phalanx, try and whittle those down if we can. Come on, Ballista. Hit these guys instead then. We'll focus our attention on killing this mangonel. Bring this back then, so it doesn't want to shoot for us. Alright, these guys get caught. Did a little bit. Oh, I don't remember telling you guys to do that. Well, that's okay. Try and get them out of there at least. Oh, they're gonna rout. Yeah, that's a mistake on my part. Shoot at the halberdiers here. Shorten the line here ever so slightly. Draw these guys back here. My salamandrines come back? I thought they might. use them as a reserve. Come on, boys. What's going on here? There we go. We gotta move forward before those arbalists can be leveraged against us. There we go, let them come to us. This damn thing just won't shoot at anybody. Go for that general kill here if we can. Get these guys out of there. I'm gonna make those wretches rout. Get out of there, boys.
Cruel fate. We have lost half our warriors.
Let's take these guys here. Move to attack those arbalists now.
Only half the enemy force remains between us and victory.
Just gotta get him through here. Come on, boys, pull through. Let's try and surprise him. Just gotta get him to hold. Any halberds in here? We do. Need them to push through here. While the second company of halberds, at the very least these guys, move forward, try and act as a blocker. Oh, our general, we need to blow that horn there. Get in here, boys. Just gotta continue to hold. I don't think we're gonna be able to win this one. I don't think we have it left in us. It's a good match, though.
has fallen.
Uh oh, we lost our general. That's bad news. Just as we were maybe about to kind of bring this back a bit. Yeah, we did actually really well considering this is like a not easy match for Angband. Or for the Easterlings. Like, this is a hard battle. But I thought we did pretty well. Uh-oh, starting to get some routing here though, and that's not good. Oh, that's a tough one. But like, if we look at what we did here, like if we were able to capture catch those bulldogs and maybe kill them off or get lucky with some cav charges, we could have melted this army. But unfortunately, he was able to play for time long enough. And like I said, this is a tough matchup for the Easterlings. Like, this is not an easy fight and one that has way too much stuff in Angband's favor. But all things considered, we did really well. Sons of Ulfang, Eastbound Horsemen. Look at the kills on these guys. That's crazy. Halberdiers all did really well. You know, Marauders got a good amount of kills this time around. Warband didn't do much, but they're not really meant to do a whole lot. And the Salamanders, we kind of ended up throwing them away. Foolishly, I didn't realize kind of what I had clicked there. And if we'd have had them at the end, like maybe that would have been... we would have been able to do something a little bit differently. Maybe we could have won on a wing and there would have been a bit more even in the center, but oh well. It is what it is. Oops. But yeah, we did really well there. I'm quite surprised. He had, you know, a few hundred troops left, but most of it's mid-tiers. I think we managed to kill off a lot of his high tiers. It's just not being able to catch the bulldogs was the problem. Let's rehost. I just have someone ask me about a siege. It does in some ways, in that halberds and pikes like that and things like that work the same. But there are quite a lot of substantial differences between this and the way that Reforged goes about things. So yeah, I'd say at this point that it doesn't really resemble it in anything more than like certain superficial ways. But that's just my personal opinion. Not everyone is gonna have the same mileage. I think we were gonna play a game with one of the newly uploaded maps. Let me just see if I can find it here. We'll pop this. That's the wrong one. Into our custom folder. It should be under Cityscape now. Yeah, there's the two here. So there's the Narog _ Watchpost, and this should be an updated version of the Narog Watchpost, which has, I think, some more entries into it. Whereas the previous iteration had, like, I think 2 major choke points. This one, I think, has 4. We actually had a fun city fight in here that I might end up posting on the channel eventually. Who should we play today? I've been playing mostly what I want to for the last little while. Or like the Easterlings, because that I thought would be a nice challenge against Angband. But, yeah. What do you guys want me to play? Any factions we haven't played in a while? Probably Arnoediad, Finarfin. I don't really play them all that much. I did put the ballista on the side there. It just didn't want to shoot. We ended up causing a minor rout into some wretches, which was cool, but it wasn't the decisive moment that we needed. Maybe if that was like a block of halberds and legionnaires, that would have been perfect. Like if we could have got our ballista up there too, that might have changed things a little bit, but it's a good game though. So I think what Camel didn't do when he uploaded this map is put it into a place where everyone can see. Hopefully everyone can get the map, and then we can get this started. I know there's a few people who are available right now. At least they were about an hour ago. Yeah, might be able to pull Tundra's Fox and Melkon and a couple other people in as well. So we should get a nice little 2v2 going on this. It's a fun little cityscape map. Like I said, we played 2v2 on it not too long ago, and I will post the replay for that eventually because it's off the wall. But it was really, really good. The fight in the city was super satisfying. There's lots of ways like in and out and around things. It's just, yeah, really, really good. Are we playing on the public build? No, indeed we are not. Today we're going to be playing on our test build. Sweet. I'd say we'll get at least, probably a 3v3 actually. Oh, unless Sartorius leaves us for good. Well, if nobody has any suggestions for factions we're going to play, I'll probably play as either the Sons of Feanor, or the House of Feanor, or the Philothrum, one of the two. I think they'll both be particularly good. Their infantry blocks are quite stubborn, which will allow our allies the time they need to maneuver and so forth. Let's see if we can pull a few more testers in. Good, Artorius is back and has joined us. We should get another, at least 2 people, which means we'll probably need 1 more. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for some more people to join in our lobby, if you guys are just joining us for the first time, you have any questions about the mod, about the direction, about what features will be available, factions, units, etc., and so forth, by all means ask. I love answering these sorts of questions, and I'm one of the lead developers, so I probably have an answer to most of the things you're going to ask. School's going well. Need to catch up to date with the communities. Yeah, there's been a lot that's happening. I know that Reforged has released a new patch. We obviously released ours as well. If you're interested in kind of seeing where things are at peak, I can certainly put a link to our community Discord here in the chat for yourself and for anybody else who's interested in the mod. That's us. And here's our mod DB as well. Will there be an only campaign faction? It's possible that there may be, not an only campaign faction, but there is the possibility of multiplayer only factions. Currently, there's not a campaign only faction that's planned. If you can play it in campaign, you can also play it in multiplayer, but not necessarily vice versa. I feel like doing it. Review this map in contrast to the previous version. Absolutely, I will do that. Perfect. Butcher is joining us. Hunter's Fox is here, and I think Melkon is going to come as well, which means we should be okay on numbers. I think my region is wrong. It's possible. Steam likes to switch that on me all the time. But yeah, so if you guys have any questions, particularly about Gondolin, I know a lot of people ask me about Gondolin, and they are the focus of the next patch, the Nirnaeth Arnoediad. Ask away, by all means. I can tell you right now, some of the frequently asked questions I get are, will all of the houses be in Silmarillion Total War? Yes, they will. They will not all be in Gondolin. All of them, with the exception of the House of the Mole, will be available to draw upon for Gondolin in both campaign and in multiplayer as well. Whereas the House of the Mole will be a mercenary that are recruitable for Angband once they conquer the city of Gondolin, fairest of all elven cities. Other than that, every single house will have their own specialization. I'm going to draw as much as I can upon the Fall of Gondolin, which I read recently and is fantastic, for inspiration, for armor, weapons, specialization, and so forth. And that will shift around a little bit in the case of, in particular in the case of the House of the Pillar and the House of the Tower of Snow. I think I'm just kind of doing whatever I can for those two because they're not super distinguished in the story from what I recall. So I think one is a spear unit, one's an axe unit. That's not directly drawn from the story, but we add Fingolfin. Yes, Fingolfin's already in the mod, actually. Tuor will probably have a custom model eventually. I don't know if it'll come out with the Gondolin faction. It really does depend on how much work we get done and how quickly. But his House of the Wing will nonetheless be there. Glorfindel will be in the mod, and Turgon is already done. So yes to all but one of those questions. A definitive yes. AirPods on. Malcon shouldn't be too much longer. And can finally get this going. So we're probably going to be playing against Angband regardless of what happens. It won't really matter too much since we're going to be in a city fight and things are just going to be a jumbled mess anyway. But maybe the wise thing to do here would be to play House of Fingolfin. So we will bring... How do we want to do this? Who's playing as Angband? Butcher is playing as Angband. I haven't played with him too much, so I'm not too sure what he'll bring. But we will bring Aidimo Adentad, Arqueni Findicano, the personal retinues of Fingolfin and Fingon, respectively. Do I want to give them an attack upgrade? I kind of do, yes. We will also take some Harumatar because they are devastating. Herdsmen. And we're going to focus largely on close quarters. We'll leave this skirmishing. We'll leave some money left over and we'll see what kind of ally we get, and we'll decide whether or not we want to go full melee or leave a little bit of extra wiggle room for skirmishers. Definitely want you guys. And 3 bladesmen and 3 sentries is kind of a staple of Fingolfin, so we're definitely going to do that. That leaves us with 10k. That is not correct. Catapult probably actually be nice on this. On my Crystal map, you'll notice that I added a Glorfindel statue that basically parallels the illustration from the book whereon he fell. That's kind of a cool detail. I'm excited to play Crystal, and eventually we will get there once we have Gondolin up and running and so on. See if Malcon's able to join us. I think he might be having some installation woes. Let's see here. Alright, so I think Delramur is going to come and join us instead. That'll be our 6th player. Shouldn't take too long. I think he's already got everything installed and ready to go. Just needs the map. But in the meantime, Gondolin questions, fire away. Faction is basically done. There just needs to be a few more units and stuff that are finished. When will Gondolin be put to the public? And have I managed to get a major YouTuber like Pixelated Apollo to do coverage on the mod? I have sent some stuff to Pixelated Apollo. He said he was going to do it. It's a big 3v5 siege, which is a lot of fun, on a custom map made for us by Eclipse. He said he was going to do it. I just don't know when he plans to actually release the video. It's really just down to his schedule. So, yeah. But we did have Indie Pride cover the mod quite some months back before I think we added the House of Fingolfin. I think we were still at like 7 or so factions. That would have been after the Easterling and Philothrum patch, I believe. But so far I have been sending things out to YouTubers, etc., etc. But it's just a matter of them fitting those things into their schedule and like being interested enough in Medieval 2 and their audiences being interested enough to actually put them on display on any sort of regular basis. So hopefully soon, but we'll see. I think Gondolin will be one of those factions that people are like really, really drawn to, not only because it's Gondolin and a huge part of the First Age and it's like a massive mythic city that even people who haven't read the story know the name Gondolin. But it's also sort of the dumping ground for all of our like crazy high fantasy stuff. So lots of really cool looking units, very bright, very colorful, high crested helms and plumage and all that stuff. So visually I think it's pretty interesting for people, and that might be what kind of tips the scales and makes them more likely to cover it, but we'll see. Yay, Delamar's here. Badass. And so, we have, in fact, 3,000 left over. And Delamar's going to play as Feanor, so I will probably bring some skirmishers, just because you never know. I will need some Ferdsman reserves. That's a nice thing to have. These guys probably don't need these attack upgrades. We'll give that to the Arqueni Findicano instead. Which, if you guys haven't seen this unit before, it is tremendously beautiful. Castellan of Angmar did a fantastic job on it. And you're in for a treat. Yeah, we got lots of killing power here. We got the Herdsman of Hithlum, some Edyne with two-handed axes from the House of Ador. We've got the Herumatar here, which is a elite detachment. It is unique to House Fingolfin. Solid front line. We've got some medium infantry with javelins and things like that we can use as reserves, and some holding troops, and then of course some skirmishers. So it'll be all right. Oh, Malkon joined us. Oh, I didn't think he was ever going to get in. Huh. Ooh, this will be fun. I actually get to spectate. Oh, somebody left. Artorias left. Why would you leave? We should be able to get Artorias back in here. It shouldn't take too long. Hopefully we can get him back in here. If not, we'll just play it. We'll just be normal. It's fine. I guess so. Oh, pardon me. I think we might be able to pull someone back in here, which means that I can spectate and I can go over things in a little bit more detail without being quite so distracted. Will they have any cavalry units even though they were an infantry faction? Yes, they will have a single cavalry unit. One what I tried to do with Gondolin, and sort of to understand this decision, you need to know a little bit about Gondolin as a faction and how it's going to work, is that I wanted Gondolin to have a sort of base roster, like a small but core roster of like mid-tier units. And those ones happen to be the houses of the Harp, Tree, and the Swallow. And then for everything outside of that, each house is going to be a specialist in its own sort of area and sphere of warfare. And I'm going to draw as much from the story as I'm able to, but sometimes sacrifices have to be made in order to like keep things diverse and not have copy units. And so, the House of the Golden Flower will have 2 units. One will be a multiple HP bodyguard unit, which will be particularly good at fighting elephants, sort of a reference there to Glorfindel's duel with the Balrogs. But the other unit will be a cavalry unit. And I realize that Salgand is the only elf in Gondolin who rode a horse, but that's how it's going to be. So they will have a Lancer unit in the form of the House of the Golden Flower, and I'll share the particulars of those units a little bit later on. Warlord, normally you would be able to join if this was our normal sort of like newbie streams, but this is actually on our test build, so unless you're on the test build currently, and you have access to our testers' chat and so forth, then you won't be able to join this particular game. Let's see if I'm missing any other Gondolin questions. Yeah, so it seems like Alexander will be on his way, which means we will switch to Easterlings, and we will spectate. I'll give myself a singular unit of Salamandrian Guard with all the trappings. And then Alexander will come and take our place, and we'll just be able to kind of chat a little bit more, interact with people, answer questions, and also cover the battle in depth. Is this a custom map? Yes, it is, actually. This is... I believe the Narog Watch post is currently available on the public build, but this is a revised version of it that adds some extra entrances into the fortress. So you don't just have the 2 really, really difficult to pass choke points. You've got more doors and more options, and it's not quite as static when you play. You're not just grinding down forever. Let's see here. Why don't I just tell you stuff about Gondolin? For those of you out there that are feeling a little bit shy today. But as I mentioned, the House of... not the House of Gondolin. The Hidden City of Gondolin will be composed of many different houses, each of which will be their own unique unit. Some of them get 2, like the House of the Golden Flower that I mentioned earlier. But every single one of them is going to specialize in a certain area of warfare. They will have a baseline roster composed of the houses of the Tree, Swallow, and Harp. And those will be their sort of regular mid-tier units. It's a swordsman, a slinger mace unit, and a spear/bow unit. Everything else will be more expensive than your average unit, but they will have some sort of unique characteristics that make them sort of the masters of their particular trade. Therefore, Gondolin, I predict, will probably be a really good dueling faction, so like 1v1s, because you can tailor your build very, very, very well to what your enemies are going to bring. And that might not be as easy to do in a larger scale game, but we'll see how that works out. But the basic idea is that you'll have a team of specialists that you supplement with your baseline mid-tier roster, just to give you a little bit of flavor and variety and diversity amongst your compositions. And also, they will look cool. I can guarantee you the Gondolin is going to be one of the best looking factions in the mod. I have seen the work that's been done on the House of the Wing, and the Hammer of Wrath, and everything else so far. The Hammer of Wrath is actually previewed on our ModDB, but the House of the Wing you haven't seen yet, and they are fantastic. We have Castellum Angmar, who's doing a lot of work for us, along with Skylee. House of the Swallow should be fodder. They largely will be, yeah. They're one of the 3 mid-tier houses. They're a sort of hybrid spear archer unit. I'd have to look at my notes again and get the exact details, but from memory, the House of the Swallow will function as sort of... Well, they will be a hybrid, and they won't have as much ammunition as your baseline skirmishers. In fact, the only true archer unit that Gondolin will have will be the House of the Heavenly Arch, and they'll be very, very good at what they do, but low in number and quite expensive. Because I don't want to turn Gondolin into a skirmish faction, right? I want them to be have this solid mix of heavy and medium and some light infantry, and be more about kind of getting into close quarters and smashing people up. I think it's a little bit more interesting than sitting back and just pew-pewing away for a million years. So they won't really be able to do that, but they will also launch with a legendary company as well. So the average Gondolin army or trooper is not going to be trained in the use of pikes. But being a big fan of the story, having read the Silmarillion and a lot of the other ancillary material multiple times, there is mention of a phalanx of the king. And so since we have a House of the King, I decided I would make the legendary company from that unit. And there will be a 1-capped pike unit called the Phalanx of the King, and they'll be quite potent, but obviously limited by their low numbers, their cost, and the fact that you can only bring one of them. But still, nonetheless, is a useful thing to mix into your line in crisis situations or to help you push and things like that. So part of an oblique formation, those pikes could potentially be an essential part of your composition, but we'll see. I'm excited because they're going to have their own unique model as well. It's not going to be anything like what the House of the King that we have previewed right now in the ModDB. It's going to be its own unique thing, made custom by Castellan of Angmar. So that's really exciting. Can I help you open the mod? Probably, but I don't think I'll be able to do it on stream. If you're needing some help, what I suggest that you do is follow this link right here. This will take you to our Discord. We have a help and bug channel, and you can ask for some help in there, and people will be able to get you sorted. I just won't be able to do it on stream right now. Joke goes overhead. How's this? I mean, I get what you're going at. I'm not going in that direction. I'm going in the direction of telling people more about Gondolin, who are awesome. Where is Alex? He's loading up, so he should be here momentarily. I know you can't see what I'm writing in game, Melcon. Looks like Steam switched my download region, and now I'm probably on the Vancouver download region instead of the UK London one we all play on. Revan, how is the campaign coming along? It's a little bit slow because our lead developer is kind of caught up, or our lead campaign guy is kind of caught up in the whole like COVID thing and having to work all the time and yada yada yada. So we have got someone else who will be helping us out and making more progress on the campaign, but I know that there has been some work on the map that's been done by Commander Soul, Belagost, WK, and things like that. So it is coming along. It's just a little bit slow. One goal I would like to have for the next patch is to have sort of a bare bones sandbox campaign ready to go and ready for people to play. But maybe that's a little bit too lofty an aspiration, and I don't know if we'll be able to accomplish that, but that is something we're going to shoot for sure. Alexander's to change his region as well, so it looks like Steam has kind of screwed all of us in that way. But let's see. What else do I know about Gondolin? That's kind of the long and short of it, I guess. I could talk about a little bit more about the specializations of each of the houses. House of the Fountain will be two-handed swords. Excuses. There's a real crisis here. Campaign over health work. Yeah, I only really ever see him like maybe once a week, so it's kind of hard to understand where he's at. But work has been made. It's just a little bit slow right now. Or progress has been made. But let's see. House of the Fountain, I was talking about them. Two-handed swords, kick a lot of ass, expensive, but very good at what they do. I think they also cause fear, or will cause fear. What Wow, the other houses' names are kind of escaping me right now. The House of the Hammer of Wrath will be one of the few Gondolin units that can upgrade their armor, and they will by far be the most heavily armored and shielded of any of the houses. They will also have a reasonable cap, I think, of about 3. And I think the unit itself is about 100, so you can bring 300 members of the House of the Wrath per army, if you so choose. They will have a mace and be armor piercing, and just be kind of juggernauts. Let's see here. Name a house, and I'll tell you about them. The House of the Tree, Slingers, and also Macemen, since they have... they're described as having like wooden clubs, like iron-studded, so I'm just interpreting that to be a mace. Possibly a shillelagh if we get the model made for it, but who knows. House of the Harp, just your regular sort of average mid-tier swordsman. They're a baseline unit, so they don't do a ton of things that are like really, really special. They're just kind of there to help you supplement your numbers and to spend a little bit more of your money and make it go a bit farther. The House of the Wing are more of a supporting unit, so they are another sword and board unit, but unlike the medium infantry that are the House of the Harp, these guys are heavier. They also inspire. So Gondolin doesn't have a ton of inspire units. One of them is the House of the King, and the other is the House of the Wing. So the House of the Wing in that way will be a useful support unit, useful for keeping the rest of your troops in line. Let me think. The House of the Mole. People are always going to ask questions about the House of the Mole. The House of the Mole won't be in the Gondolin faction to play in multiplayer, but you will see them in the campaign as a mercenary unit for Angband to recruit after they destroy the city of Gondolin. So they won't be present in the average Gondolin roster, but they will still be in the mod in some capacity. Other things to note is that there will be like Elven militia units, and I'm looking into making some custom ones to represent the gate guards of the passes into the hidden plane of Tumladen. So it's possible that you'll see like garrisons composed of campaign-only units of militia and things like that, in addition to the regulars drawn from the various noble houses. Where are you, Alex? Let's see. What other houses haven't I talked about? Talked about Swallow, talked about Tree, Hammer of Wrath, House of the King. So the House of the King is your standard bodyguard unit. They have an armor upgrade, which is lovely. And they are a sword and board unit, but that is something that may possibly change in the future, because one thing I don't like to have in rosters is many different copies of units that fulfill more or less the same role. And currently, they kind of occupy a similar role to that of the House of the Wing, except that they're more expensive and there's not as many of them, and you can't bring them in as great numbers because of the caps. So that's something that may change, and they may get a new weapon type in the future. Maybe they end up being like halberds or something. I don't know. But they will be present in the game. I'm just kind of deciding what the place of them is going to ultimately be. Who else? Who am I missing? The Pillar. Yes, the Pillar will be Spearmen, and I'm looking at the possibility of getting them a one-handed spear wall animation. So you get the spear wall force multiplier, but you don't have the same range of pikes and halberds and things like that. But you also, get some of the benefits. So that will hopefully be the House of the Pillar. The House of the Tower of Snow, I believe, will be Axemen, and they will have some little nice boosts to their charge value in particular that will make them particularly strong as shock troops, so you can use them alongside, say, the House of the Fountain to really, really devastate your opponents. It's a lot of killing power. Heavenly Arch, we covered them, but they will be a heavily armored archer unit, the only dedicated skirmisher for Gondolin. Their accuracy will be impeccable, and because Gondolin was a city that was very well prepared, I want to sort of represent that in their archer unit as an additional ammo bonus, because it said that Gondolin is a city that could have shot arrows day and night for like a year or something straight. Like it was something preposterous like that, and never run out of arrows. So I want to have that little detail represented in the House of the Heavenly Arch. So they will be bowmen. They will use a skirmisher template, but they'll be a little bit smaller, so their stats will be higher. And they'll also have some two-handed swords, which is nice. And very good armor as well. They were one of the richer houses, so they can afford those the really juicy equipment and things like that. Who should I be here that no one is being? Fingolfin. Okay. Bring the Arqueni. Why don't I bring some of the cool Fingolfin units, and we'll just show them off, and we'll talk about them a little bit while this game goes underway. Will Gondolin be getting its own custom city map? I know that WK expressed some interest in making a custom city map for Gondolin. He's already done so, but there was some problems with too many assets, and it just was more than the game engine could handle. It was just flew a bit too close to the sun with that one. But he has expressed interest in taking that project up again. We've added a lot more assets and stuff to the game, so maybe he'll draw on those. But he is also doing school and has a real life on top of that, so I really wouldn't want to ask more of him than what he's already done for us. So we'll see. I hope that we will have a proper siege map with Gondolin, but currently we do have a cityscape that was made by one of our players, Captain Rex, and it's pretty damn good, and it pays attention to a lot of the details. So, who knows? We'll see. We do currently have a Gondolin map, but it's not the massive city and like siege map that I think a lot of people will probably want. It's just a regular cityscape, which can be fun. We've showed it off. UMAD Commander's also put it on his channel as well. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what WK is up for. Like I don't like to push people beyond their limits, especially when they have so much going on in their real life. So hopefully is the long and short of it. But that's a lot about Gondolin. Let's talk a little bit about the Halidin. So currently, there are a lot of Elven factions in the mod. That's not to say that every faction is fully Elven. There's Edain houses that are important parts of them. But other than the Easterlings, we don't have a purely human faction. The Halidin will be the second one that we have. And that one, running a little bit crazy with the creativity, I guess. It's going to be a little bit more divorced, I guess, from the Halidin of the books. I still want to have those sort of rustic Northmen vibes, and I am shooting along with the team for like a sort of mix of Celtic and Nordic assets, some of which we'll use from existing things, and some of them will be made like custom for the units. But basically, they'll be kick-ass Vikings, and they will focus on their light infantry, mobility. They'll have some lock morale units as well, which can be useful for tar pitting and giving you the opportunity to flank and surround your units and other units and things like that. I also want them to have ambush elements to them, so they will have some units that can hide just about anywhere or hide very well in trees and have solid bonuses in scrub and forest terrain. They will also have some hard counters to certain very powerful units, such as the elephants, the Urloki, the Ents, Sauron, and the Balrogs in particular. They will have a legendary company that is a variant of their Berserker unit, which will be theming after sort of like Shield Maidens, because it is mentioned that the Halidin had a large number of women fighting in the tribe, so the whole tribe would band together to fight. I will answer that question for you in just a second there, Alex. So they'll have that female Berserker unit, and they will have the Throne trait, which allows them to function as a hard counter to some of the really nasty units that can be very, very strong against a lot of their infantry. So they don't have pole arms, for example, which hard counter elephants and things like that, but they do have a means of addressing that. But I'll talk a little bit more about them in a second. Who's my favorite faction currently in the mod? And what faction do you think will be the public favorite? I think that Gondolin will be the public favorite. I think that Gondolin as a city and the Noldor and things like that just capture people's imagination. And they are in a lot of ways like quintessential to the first stage. They're like the pinnacle of Elven civilization, culture, architecture, military prowess, etc., etc. So I think that that'll be a public favorite. My personal favorite right now, in terms of looks, is the House of Fingolfin. They have some of the coolest looking units in the game, I think, by far. But my current darling for playstyle is Toland Gaurhoth. I really like Toland Gaurhoth. I've been having a lot of fun with them. Our last stream was playing with them, and our last video was playing with them again in a 2v2. So, playstyle-wise, I think that they offer a lot that's rewarding. There's lots of micro, there's lots of like tactics and strategies that open with your missiles and things like that. And they're just active and energetic, and I really enjoy playing with them. But currently, looks-wise, House of Engulfin is my favorite. You're going to see a lot of their cool units when we get this game started. But I think, just to reiterate, the public favorite will probably be Gondolin for sure. But yeah, that's sort of a brief summary of the Haladin. And then after that, there's really only one faction that's currently planned. So for a total of 12, maybe a 13th, but I will tell you more about that when we get closer to being able to show them off, if we ever get there. But the next planned faction after Gondolin and after the Haladin will, of course, be the Dwarves. They will be in the mod. You can't have some of the most important battles and moments of the Silmarillion, such as driving Glaurung back into Angband during the Nirnaeth or Arnoediad, or the sack of Doriath without the dwarves. So they will, of course, be present. Obviously, Feanor looks the best. You know, that's a good point. Feanor looks really cool, and they will probably be getting some more like visual flair in this patch as well. All the Elven factions will, but Feanor in particular, I have something in mind that actually Celtic brought up, and we may use some resources from Castellan of Angmar to make them look even cooler. But, goodness, where was I? I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, right, the dwarves. If you guys have any questions about the dwarves, about their implementation, how we plan to make them different from other dwarven factions that you might be familiar with in other mods, such as Vanilla, Third Age Total War, Third Age Reforged, Divide and Conquer, etc., etc., more than happy to talk about that. If you guys have any questions, just chime in, but I will give you a brief blurb on the Nalgrim and how they're going to function. Okay, well, I'll start with one of the reasons why they're going to work the way that they work. One of the sort of common themes in a lot of dwarven factions is that the dwarves are very, very slow, but they're heavily armored, and you have this sort of big formation that you just walk forward in as this big old death wall. And I want to preserve some elements of that, because I think that that's something that people will expect from the dwarves, and also kind of makes sense, given what we know about them from the story. But I do want to try and do some little, I guess, kind of sneaky things that make them more interesting and make you have more clicks, basically, when you're playing them. You're not just like, you know, half asleep as you walk forward and try and death wall people. Let me just move my troops out of the way here. That's the Sons of Húrin right there, but we'll talk about them. So one of the things the dwarves will have, and this is it's sort of a joke, but at the same time I quite like the idea, is they will have a very high charge distance, so that when you're playing as them, you have the ability to have a little bit of like contextual movement. Okay, cool, I can actually move out of the city and just move all the way to the back here. Oh no. Don't tell me we waited all this time just to crash. That would be awful. But they will have a very high charge distance that will allow them to have that contextual movement. So it's sort of a natural sprinter thing, right? If you get too close to the dwarves and you're trying to kite them or get really, really close with your skirmishers and just be cheeky because you don't think they're going to have any means of catching you, think again, because they might just be able to get on top of you. And this is going to apply on top of the axe and shock infantry bonuses that those sort of units would regularly get for any other faction. So axe units have higher charge distance, shock units have higher charge distance. Oh no, what happened? Let's see if he crashed. Yeah, he crashed, so we'll just have to rehost this one. That's okay. Or we'll just host a different map, and I think maybe there's a possibility that it's the map, so I'll just do a regular old game here. We'll do it on Húrin's Homestead, which is one of the new maps in the Fall of Feanor patch. And I'll put myself in Team 3, like the loner that I am. So that'll be one of the things that they have. The other thing is that Silmarillion uses what's called a detachment system, so you can pay half price for a half strength unit of whatever. The dwarves will take that to sort of a different direction. All of their supporting units, such as their shock infantry, such as their crossbowmen and their axe throwers and things like that, will be detachment units. So you can split your fire into multiple different places along your traditional sort of dwarven shield wall, but you have just more things to do on your back line, and you're not just like, click one unit, shoot one unit, and then you just sort of wait out the grind, and it's not as much fun. So your shock units will be there so that you can perform flanking maneuvers, not necessarily risk the full cost and the full numbers of a full strength unit. And then you'll have your supporting units, your missile units, and you can choose to split your fire into various different places, which does sometimes give you a nice tactical advantage, or you can focus your fire depending on kind of what your needs are going to be. In addition to, they will also have some unique artillery pieces, and each one of their artillery crews will be a unit unto itself. In a lot of mods, artillery crews tend to just kind of be trash. They're just there to push the big boom box and shoot fireballs at people. In Silmarillion Total War, this is true for all factions, but it will be taken, I guess, to the next level with the dwarves. All artillery crews are like regular line infantry. They're trained. They're a little bit closer to your traditional engineer. They're not just some scrub peasant that you picked up off the street and stuck behind a ballista. The dwarves will each have, actually one of their bodyguard units will be a mortar unit, though not a black powder weapon, but it will have that indirect fire and that big arc. Other units will have weapon types that exist nowhere else in the dwarven roster outside of that particular artillery crew. Things like that, so that you're bringing your artillery not just for their boom boom pretty firework potential, but also because they can serve purposes after their ammunition has been expended, and you can use them in unique ways. So that's, I guess, 3 of the sort of big things that we're doing to try and make the dwarves, I guess, a little bit more interesting. Can you get one other person here? Yes, we will. And looks like someone else is going to play the House of Fingolfin today, so maybe I'll just show off some of the cool Feanor units that Celtic was mentioning earlier. Take the Legendary Company and the Shiny Mounts for their high tier units. I guess the Otor and Mighty Mo. And the Footmen of Atlas. Although I could show you each tier individually, so you kind of know what they look like and what the progression is. Cool, let's do that. Will there be a specific unit of dwarves that fares better against the dragons, like in the story? Actually, all of them will, in some way or another. So, the way that our fire projectiles work has kind of been designed from the beginning with dwarves and with heavily armored units in mind. So, heavy armor and heavy shields are pretty good protection. Actually, they're almost perfect protection, depending on your armor and shield values, against fire from the front. From the back, you lose the shield value, so it can hurt more. But in general, in 90% of cases, heavy infantry will just stand up better to fire, because fire is an armor piercing in our mod. And that was done, for that reason, so that heavy infantry and the dwarves eventually would be able to stand up to fire like they do in the story, and also for the practical purpose of not making choke points or like strong points and things like that irrelevant. So, and don't take this as, hating on the mod, but one of the things that I personally dislike about the way that the Witcher unit works in Reforged is that it can be used to sweep away an entire choke point, basically annulling the value and the preparation that you put into it, and just making that irrelevant. It just blows them up and tears through them with huge amounts of fire. That's something that I wanted to avoid, and that's the other reason why. I messed up the money. I did not mess up the money. The game messed up the money. No, seriously. This is a weird bug. I don't know how to get around it. Hopefully that works. There we go. So those are the 2 reasons behind why fire works the way that it works currently. Does the map look better? Unfortunately, we won't be playing the map, Matt, because we had a crash on it almost immediately, and we waited in the lobby for a really long time to get everybody. So we're just trying to get people into a game and have some fun. So we'll give it another shot. Maybe later I'll try and do like a 1v1 or like a 2v2 on it, but for the time being, we're just going to do a regular field battle. Hondalius, hi, I haven't played in ages. Is this a new version of Third Age Reforged? No, actually, this is a different standalone mod that uses Third Age 0.95 as a base just for my convenience, so I don't have to re-implement everything that I want to. But it is its own standalone thing. We'll have its own campaign, its own multiplayer meta that is distinct from that of Third Age Reforged. Yeah, and it's set in the first age. So obviously, Third Age is set in the, you guessed it, the Third Age. The first age takes place during that sort of mythic period in like the early nascence of Middle-earth's history, where elves brush shoulders with demons and gods, and it was just a very mythical, crazy period in history. So you're going to see things like dragons in this, Balrogs, Sauron is also kicking around. He's been a villain for a very long time. Many elven factions, a lot of like very fantasy, high concept elven units, things like that. Men are present, dwarves are present, orcs are present, but this is very much the zenith of elven civilization, so it does focus on them a little bit more. Let's see here. Well, we do have quite a lot of people, surprising amount of people, in the chat right now. So I will take the time to remind you that because it's October and because I love Halloween, you're also going to be getting a map pack that will be publicly available for most of October and possibly some of November as well. And that's going to add about 90 or so assets into the battle editor, all of which have been drawn from Battle for Middle-earth 2. That's just sort of our gift to you guys, the community. And we love Halloween, and I hope you love Halloween too. It's going to open up the possibility for some really nice Halloween maps. I'm going to be showing those off throughout the month of October. I will be doing a battle editor tutorial as well to both show off those assets and also kind of show you the ropes of how the battle editor works. It's fairly simple, it's just old and a little bit weird. So that's pretty cool. Keep an eye on our ModDB page. I will put a link here down in chat for you. And then I will answer your question about tournaments there, Alex Zuno, because we do actually have a tournament coming up. Might be starting as early as tomorrow, actually. That's going to be our ModDB, so if you guys want to get in on the map asset pack while it is available, that'll be available throughout October and for part of November, probably, depending on when we get it up. Yeah, that's where you'll find it. But to answer your question, do I have a Patreon? I would love to support this mod. The mod itself does not currently have a Patreon, and I'll tell you why. Much like Third Age Reforged and like Divide and Conquer, we do use assets that have been made by other people. Lewis Lux is one of those people who's like an old school Third Age Reforged modder, and a large number of other people as well. So to me personally, it wouldn't feel right to have, even though we do have a lot of our own custom assets, it wouldn't feel right to have a Patreon and to be profiting from the work of other people. So that's why we don't currently have a Patreon. That's just a personal choice that has been made. I do have a Patreon for the channel, but that doesn't necessarily go towards supporting the mod and buying software and stuff like that. And mostly people have everything that they need anyway. So yeah, there wouldn't really be too much of a purpose for us to have a Patreon, and I wouldn't feel right doing that since we do use assets from other people, even though, like I said, we have a lot of our own custom stuff, and you're going to see some of that here today. But I do have a personal channel Patreon, so if you want to support the channel and the content that I put out through there, I use it mostly for giveaways. It gets split about half and half. It goes into a pool that I use to fund giveaways, and then the other half goes towards like upgrading my computer in the long term. That's pretty much what it's for. But yeah, looking forward to see how it plays. I hope you get to see how it plays too. We've been stuck in this lobby for a million years, and I'm just not sure we're ever going to get out of it. Everyone's just taking their time, doing their thing. Just need Malcon. But if you are also interested in seeing kind of how it plays in a more, I guess, like in-depth approach, I will go into some depth here because I am able to spectate. But I do offer like streaming and like coaching services for people who are new to the mod, and that's, I don't charge anybody for that. I guess it sort of sounds like that the way I worded it, but it's just, if you're interested in the mod, I'll sit down, I'll play with you, we'll have some fun, and we'll do it on stream so other people can learn too. It's kind of cool. I think I've got about 5 of them up so far. Metallic CJ. Hi, I don't think I've seen you before, but welcome to the stream. Welcome to the channel if you're just joining us for the first time. Cool. So here we are. And I will put these guys off in the corner, but I will show them off to you, and I will talk a little bit about... Actually, there's some cool stuff here. So we're going to get into legendary companies and their uses and things like that. Let's put these guys here. Otorn out front. Hunters and the cavalry can go over here. And the legendary company can go front and center. Alright, we'll put them into a formation, and then we'll just like run them to the very edge of the map here. So, let's talk first about the legendary companies, because honestly, I'm just really excited to talk about legendary companies. It's a cool idea, one that we have definitely lifted from Warhammer and their Regiments of Renown sort of practice, but unlike some of the Regiments of Renown in the game, the legendary companies are not a catch-all unit. They're not going to be useful in every situation. They are, in many cases, very, very situational units. So this is the Accursed of Aquilonde. They are themed after some of the Noldor who would have been following in the vanguard of Feanor and would have been very, very extremely guilty of the slaying of their kinsmen, the Teleri, when they tried to seize their boats during their flight from Valinor. And so, this unit, unlike the Defenders of Aglon, who is a standard two-handed sword unit and works like every other two-handed sword unit in the game, these guys are very, very, very reliant on their armor. Their melee defense is lower than their standard kind of rank and file counterpart. But one of the things they do have going for them is they inspire. They are relentless, which means they have no stun animation, so they are just always hitting you. Oh no. Come on, Melkon. Oh, I think I saw our units move a little bit. We should be okay. I saw them moving. Yeah, okay, we're fine. And they are also relentless, so they don't have stun animations. So they're always hitting you, and they are also fear-causing, because they're mighty heroes, but they're also guilty of some very, very morally questionable things, and that will instill their enemies with a little bit of fear. But the things that they are weak to that other units, and the rank and file units are not particularly, is armor piercing and cavalry charges. Melee defense is pretty good defense against being charged from the front by both infantry and cavalrymen. These guys will get crushed by that. You can take a very cheap armor piercing unit, like a two-handed axe from just about any faction, and you can kill off about half of this unit. But if you choose your engagements well, these guys can get 200, 300 kills in a game. But they can also be shut down just as easily. But that's sort of the idea behind not Regiments of Renown, legendary companies. Is that they are a situational unit that does broaden a faction's horizons, because Silmarillion factions have quite small rosters for multiplayer, and that's to keep them like focused and keep their specializations unique. So units like legendary companies do sort of open doors a little bit in a limited sort of way. So the House of Feanor, for example, are very reliant on their cavalry. This opens up the possibility for some infantry-heavy builds, which I've used in the past on stream and have done not bad. But yeah, so that's them. Then we have the Otorn Maitimo. These guys, we're looking at adding a new helmet to them, one that's custom made by Castellan of Angmar, but the name in High Elven just means the Oath Sworn of Maedhros, who is the eldest of the 7 sons of Feanor, who collectively as a family unit are famous for their mighty oath, making pretty things, and also kind of being bastards. And so the 7 sons of Feanor swear this mighty oath to retrieve the Silmarils at any cost, and it leads them to committing massacres against some of their own kinsmen on several different occasions. So these are the Oath Sworn, these are the personal bodyguards of the eldest son, and it just felt like an appropriate name for them. Over here, we have the first armor upgrade. Actually, let's do the base. So we have the standard footman unit for the Noldor. These are the footmen of Amaras, I believe. And this is their sort of standard look to them. And then you upgrade them once, and they get this lovely little plate here. And then you upgrade them a second time, and their color scheme goes red and black and twice as angry. and this is going to give them a massive 14 armor. The Sons of Feanor, as befits the house from the lineage of one of the mightiest smiths of the Noldor, have extremely high armor and shield values. But they do lack in melee defense, a little bit like the Accursed of Aquilonde in that regard, so it does sort of fit their theme. So armor piercing can be very, very useful against them. They're also quite limited in number, and their infantry are more expensive than average, but they do upgrade for a little bit of a cheaper price. And this isn't the full roster of the House of Feanor. I think they've got about 14-15 units in total. But this is just some of the cooler, more unique looking ones. So this mount here was actually taken from Botet. That's the beginning of the End Times mod, which is a Warhammer mod for Medieval 2. Their team does some of the coolest things you're going to see anywhere. They are like real innovators, so I recommend that if you haven't played it, go and check it out. It's lots of fun in both campaign and multiplayer. But we took this mod from them. This is unique to the House of Feanor, and the Lancers on top are some of the best heavy cavalry in the game, bar none. They have the best survivability, some of the best shields, and their charge is particularly devastating, more so than counterparts from other factions. So helps kind of cement them as a cavalry superiority faction. Moving on over here, we have another mount from Botet. These are going to be the Roqueni Magloro, the Knights of Maglor, who I think was the second son of Feanor. But in any case, he and his brother Maedhros worked together in many things, both good and ill. So of course they're going to be the first two kind of heroes that we end up naming units after and putting into the mod. These are the standard knight unit, as you would expect them to be in, say, Reforged, for example. They are a mix of melee cavalry and lancer units, and they hit like trucks. They are a nightmare. We're going to go back here. We're going to hide in this little dell and try not to get in people's way. But yeah, so that's two of their really strong cavalry units. They do have more. They have a horse archer, and they have a mounted javelinman, which is similar to these guys, both in look and sort of in use. Like, you can use their javelins, and they can be excellent harassment units or anti-cavalry, but if you need to, you can also use them as sort of dragoons, basically, just mobile infantry. But that's enough from the Sons of Feanor. Let's take one quick look at chat here. How's the performance of this mod? I remember the game struggling with higher player counts. We use the LAA patch by default, and because it is an older game, like the Medieval 2 engine is like 14 or 15 years old at this point. Show me Dell's Noob Trapezium. Hi Sawbones, how you doing, man? I will in just a sec, but to finish that thought, what am I looking at? Oh man, there's a lot of questions in here. But because we have the LAA mod, we are able to do the larger scale games. But like I said, this is a 14-year-old game. In really, really big games on maximum unit settings, you are going to get performance drops. But it's just something that you kind of learn to get used to in multiplayer, whereas if you're just playing single player, then it doesn't matter quite so much. One of the peculiar oddities of Total War, and this actually carries over into the more modern games, is that you run at the FPS of the slowest person in your game. So if everyone in your game has great connection, they've turned on their graphics, and all that stuff, your performance can actually be pretty damn good. And then higher graphics is for single player and like recording replays and stuff. But so to answer your question, it's not bad. There are things you can do to improve it, but there's only so much that you can do. This must be Delmore's Noob Trapezium. It certainly is. So he's going to be playing as the House of Finarfin. So House of Finarfin is one of the three royal houses of the Noldor, the other two being the House of Ingolfin and the House of Feanor. Of the three, since they have the largest territory, I thought it would be appropriate to add more mid-tiers, which adds, therefore, more numbers. So their armories can be quite large, especially relative to those of the Sons of Feanor. But they are a little bit more defensively oriented. And actually, I really like this, because I enjoy storytelling in both like mods and like the way that we sort of design things. So there's basically two kind of subtypes within the House of Finarfin roster. So you have the Talathirnan units. They're like mid-tier. You can see they've got kind of like that camouflage look to them because Nargothrond, the center of Finrod would be the son of Finarfin and sort of the overlord of a significant portion of their kingdom. He survived in his city of Nargothrond mostly by stealth. So these units kind of reflect that a little bit. They're a little bit more lightly armored since, you know, heavy armor doesn't really serve you all that well when you're fighting in, say, forest and things like that. It does sort of bog you down somewhat. So they have a lot of mid-tier units that are of the medium kind of classification. And then you have some really heavy units like these pikemen here. You can see them a little bit better up front, and the Wardens of Nargothrond and so forth. And this is sort of drawn from the later parts of the Silmarillion, where they build a bridge over the Na'arog and they go to open war against Morgoth. So they arm themselves a little bit more heavily, and things like that. These troops are a little bit more suited for like frontline open battle. And this bodyguard unit here, the Arqueni Mor Megilwa, the Knights of the Black Sword, actually reflect that. So I don't think the general's in here. Oh no, there he is. You can see Turin at the back there with his black armor, his black sword. And that is not the Dragon Helm of Dorloman. Some people have actually questioned me on this. But it is, rather, the dwarven helmet that he found in the armories of Nargothrond. So he is currently the default general. Once we get a Finrod model, he'll be within the Sartor Findorado here, the companions of Finrod. And he will just be a general, or not a general, a officer for the Arqueni Mor Megilwa. But Turin is present in this army. And then over here we have the Sartor Findorado, who represent that more defensive style of warfare, quite appropriately by being a spear unit that you can also upgrade the armor of. So they're very, very tanky, whereas Turin's bodyguard is more offensive, good at fighting elephant units, like dragons, for example, but relatively lightly armored, especially compared to a lot of these open battle units. And then we have some units here like the Marksmen of Nargothrond, some specialist archers that are split shot archers, so they fire multiple arrows with each shot, but they do pay for that by having less ammunition. You can see Sauron, of all people, is just coming to say hi to Finrod. They've made up. In the story, Sauron actually captures Finrod as he is helping Beren to complete his quest for the Silmaril, and has his companions tortured, and ultimately Finrod is killed fighting a werewolf from Tolin Gaurhoth. But today, they've kissed, they've made up. Sauron's hanging out here with us. Got a whole bunch of the Swordsmen of Talathirnin. They have javelins, but they are not a dedicated skirmisher unit. I do draw a distinction in the mod between dedicated skirmishers, who are armor-piercing, have more ammunition, have better range, etc., etc., and your average mook who just has the pointy sticks that he throws at people. So these guys are not dedicated skirmishers, and they therefore use an infantry template, so they do more damage with their in melee, they have higher stats, but they don't do the whole skirmishing thing as well, which I think is quite reasonable. What do we got here? Oh, okay, so this is the Arqueni Findicano. This is one of the units that was made special for us by Castellan of Angmar, who is extremely talented at what he does. And they are a horse archer unit, but we'll talk a little bit more about their stats in just a moment here. So we have some pike units here, the Bridge Wards of Nargothrond, appropriately named for the Bridge over the Na'arog, which they're supposed to represent in terms of time period. Wardens of Nargothrond here, who are an armor-piercing spear unit. That's just because of the way the spears work in the mod. They don't do a ton of damage, but they're great at holding the line. And therefore, the House of Finarfin needs a little bit of teeth. So the AP helps accomplish that. Oh man, I better get a move on here. We're never going to get through all of them in time. Yeah, so we'll move on from the House of Finarfin, and we'll move over here to Tolin Gaurhoth, who's being played by Tundrasvox. Here we have a legendary company for Tolin Gaurhoth, known as the Vorbak Gajutar, or the Blind Hunters. They are a hide-anywhere, locked morale warg unit. They are extremely fast, and their purpose, their whole reason for being added initially, was to act as A, an ambush unit, and B, a counter to the kiting tactics of Assyrians. So their armor is not as high as the Laugskaraz, of which they are a unique variant, but they are shielded, unlike the Laugskaraz, and they are very, very fast. So they can run down the Assyrian horse archers like you wouldn't believe. They're also a decent shock unit, but they don't have armor piercing, unlike the Laugskaraz, so there is sort of still a distinction and still a choice to be made when bringing one unit over the other. More Tolin Gaurhoth here. So we have the Hishbukraz. Actually, Tolin Gaurhoth, I wish I could slow this down, because I had to make up all of the backstory for Tolin Gaurhoth, and I'm actually a little bit proud of it. So, Tolin Gaurhoth is divided into four separate tribes of orcs. First being the Hishbukraz, which is black speech for the Ashclaws. They are largely composed of lightly armored fodder fanatics, and a lot of their units, at least half the roster, are locked morale, so they will fight to the bitter end for Sauron, their lord. Next we have the high tiers. These are the Gijak Skadas, which I can't quite remember the name of. I think it's Blood Wolves, though. And naturally, Tolin Gaurhoth is the Isle of Werewolves. So a lot of the things are named after like wolves and werewolves and things like that. So these macemen are some of the few quality infantry units that Tolin Gaurhoth can field. Next we have the Skadahai clan. These are the Skadahai Longfangs, but the Skadahai are largely the mid-tier units, whereas the The Hishbukras, with the exception of the Ash Priests, who you'll see right here, are the lower caste, sort of the expendable fodder units, and they have higher caps and higher numbers and things like that. Skada High, more mid-tier. You're going to get a lot of axes from these guys. They are quite offensively oriented. And then the Gijek Skadas all inspire, and they also act as sort of like a heavy bulwark. So they have the best staying power of just about anybody. You have the warband there, and then of course each clan is going to have their own cavalry unit. So here we have the Gijek Skadas Zagulkalab, which is black speech for Blood Wolves of the Witchfort. Gulkala is the name that I created using black speech for the Fortress of Tolin Gaudhoth. Since Tolin Gaudhoth is an elven name, it seemed weird to me that the orcs would refer to it as a Sindarin name, which they probably didn't speak and wouldn't speak even if they knew how. So we have the Blood Wolves of the Witchfort here, 2 companies of them. They are heavy melee cavalry. They really just act as a tar pit. They're a little bit less offensively oriented in practice than some of the other units, but they are still nonetheless an important unit. I think we covered most of them. It looks like Tolin Gaudhoth and Finarfin are going to switch positions. Let's go over here, take a look at what House of Fingolfin are up to. So this is the host of Hithlum in the north. We have some of the Eddine of the House of Hador, and they largely compose a lot of the utility units that the House of Fingolfin uses. So they're more offensively oriented elven units like the Noldor infantry that you see here. These are the Blade Masters of Barad Ithel. They're a heavy line unit, less well armored than Finarfin or especially Feanor, but they do supplement that lack of armor with higher melee defense and also some really nice Eddine units. We have some pikes here. We have some Blade Masters of Barad Ithel, and then we have the detachment system, which works a little bit different for them. So this is the Armitar of Barad Ithel. They're an elite detachment of the sword units that we just saw earlier on the main line. They have increased defensive stats, and they also inspire. In the back here, we have some more Eddine of the House of Hador. These are Herdsmen. No, these are Herdsmen. Herdsmen of Dorlomin. They are a hybrid unit. Most of the House of Hador skirmishers, just to keep Fingolfin from being like a stand-and-shoot faction, have less ammunition, but they exchange that for greater melee stats. And I think that's quite appropriate for one of the greatest houses of the Heroes of Men. And speaking of great heroes, next we have the Sons of Húrin. Húrin Thalion, one of the greatest hero of men. You can see him right there wearing the proper dragon helm of Dorlomin. I know he didn't wear it, but it's still kind of a cool reference. These guys are armor-piercing, locked morale as is appropriate for such a unit and such a hero, and they're absolutely devastating on the charge. And in the back there you can see Fingolfin himself, who is currently in the mod, and he acts as the default general for the House of Fingolfin, quite appropriately. And back here, let's talk a little bit about the Arconi Findicano. I'll try and do this as quickly as I can. It's very easy to get bogged down getting excited and talking about stuff. But the Arconi Findicano are a medium horse archer. They are also armor-piercing with their missiles, and you'll notice that they have this green projectile trail that goes behind whatever shot that they fire. And that's to communicate to you, the player, and also to look cool, but mostly to communicate to you, the player, that you're being shot at with armor-piercing ammunition. So when you see these bows do really high damage to your elephants or to your heavily armored shielded units, then you're going to be able to know why and understand that. And all of our special projectiles in the game do have a ribbon or a particle effect of some kind that communicates to you visually and like at a glance what's being used against you and when. Over here, Lancers of Anon in Gelud. These are just some light Lancers, high tier units, but yeah, not too many of them to go around. The House of Fingolfin doesn't really specialize very heavily in their cavalry. They're mostly infantry. Over here we have another Tolin Gaudhoth unit. This is actually the ruling caste of the orcs, just below Sauron himself. These are the Thrang Sheik, or the Rage Howl Warlords. They are multiple HP warg units. They don't have as good of a charge as the Sons of Feanor, Roqueni Magloro, rather. But still, nonetheless, they make up for that with numbers and a pretty powerful charge value all unto themselves, and they are by far the best armored unit on the Tolin Gaudhoth roster. Have some Ashclaw bowmen up here. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. They're the Hunters, and they have some interesting things going for them. they have access to fire arrows, which most people do not, because the Ash Claws are like fire-obsessed fanatics. They burn prisoners, and they smear themselves with the ashes, why they have that sort of dun appearance and the dun raiment. So naturally, they have access to fire arrows, which most units in the game do not. And they also have a special trait that makes them do extra damage against cavalry. Sometimes it hits mounts. This applies to elephants as well, more than one time, which is obviously a nice thing to have. What do we got over here? Ooh, we have the Green Elves of Arnoediad being played by Celtic. This is actually one of his kind of signature factions, as he does enjoy the playstyle. So the Green Elves are not really a faction that does well in a frontal engagement. The one time in the entirety of the lore where they actually did this, they lost their king, and they never raised another because they were so devastated by his loss. They are not for frontal fights at all. They're all about skirmishing and being fluid, and people on the Discord like to make jokes about them basically being the Viet Cong, because they can hide anywhere, they'll shoot you, they'll run away, and then you won't be able to respond to them. That's sort of their way of doing things. So he's got some Skirmishers of Rath L'Oreal here. This is an infantry unit that can also fire a little bit of ammunition before it engages in close quarters. Here we have one of the legendary companies. This is actually a detachment legendary company, which is a bit different, known as the Kinsmen of Denethor. They will hold the line indefinitely, which is something that Arnoediad tends to ask of their infantry units. Most of their units are spear units or the occasional sword unit with some axe units thrown in for good measure. Here we have the Hunters of Rath L'Oreal. They are a javelin, armor-piercing javelin, because they are a dedicated skirmisher, and a spearman hybrid. And of course, we have the Ents here, the Tree People, and these are an Elephant class unit. They do damage in an area, and they're actually reasonably swift, despite the sort of sluggishness of the animation. They're like deceptively fast, and they can be very, very scary indeed. I have some more Hunters over here, and now we have the Urfin and Tower. Now there are very, very few armored units for the Green Elves. Most of their roster is light, one medium unit, and they have 2 heavy infantry, which are simultaneously less numerous, less expensive, and very, very tightly capped. This particular unit is the Urfin and Tower, Nobles of the Forest, and they are a shock/missile hybrid unit. They are also locked morale, so they will fight to the bitter end, and those 2-handed axes that they wield are absolutely devastating. Very, very scary. You can bring 2 of them. You can also bring a detachment. And the other unit that they have, which I don't think we're going to see today, no, we have some Spearhost of Gelion here, so some 2-handed spearmen. There is another general unit that they can bring, which is the Maithern and Tol Galen, which I believe is like the warriors or the warrior folk of Tol Galen. They are a medium, or sort of like a heavy maceman, but they're very, very small and extremely expensive. Out here, Scouts of Gelion, the main line archer unit for the Green Elves. This is the thing that's going to do the most shooting in your army. They have a lot of units that have missiles. Most of their units have a missile that's available to them, but not all of them have a lot of ammunition for it. We got some early action here. The Gijak Skadas, who are quite adept at soaking up this missile fire, trying to take a bite out of the Scouts of Gelion. Now, the Scouts have quite high melee defense from the front, as weapon type is very important in Silmarillion Total War. These guys happen to have daggers, so if you see them from the front like this, they're not going to take a ton of damage from the charge, but they're actually going to get shot to death by their fellows just in behind them. That's where a lot of that a lot of those casualties are going to come from. But they do have high melee defense because they dual wield daggers. Daggers are armor piercing, but they're extremely low. They have like 1 or 2 damage as their base, but they have very high melee defense. So that's the thing that they do well, but they basically soak up charges and charge damage, and can be a little bit scary if they manage to surround you and get behind you and shiv you like the dog that you are. They're going to carry through here, Tundra's Fox, into the next line of the Green Elf Skirmishers, which is surprising to see Celtic get caught out like this. Normally he's very, very quick and very, very responsive. It could just be we're having a little bit of latency issues here, which is preventing him from being able to be as quick on his feet as normal. And then I think this is our last faction. Yeah, did we talk about Angband? No, we'll talk about them in a second. So we have the Easterlings here. Now, decided to go a little bit of a different route. The Easterlings, both by the names of their tribes and like the names of the individuals in it, are sort of implied to be more Germanic, but I kind of have my own personal headcanon that there is this great betrayal that happens amongst the Easterling tribes, where the Sons of Ulfang turn on the Sons of Bor and the Sons of Feanor during one of the most pivotal battles of the wars in Beleriand, and they betray them, and the Easterlings of Bor are slaughtered. I like to think that the Sons of Ulfang sort of took the resplendent armor and the style that the Sons of Bor, who they murdered, had, and they would carry that forward later into the Third Age, sort of assume that mantle and that sort of legitimacy that these Easterlings had, but in this very corrupted form. So, to that end, the Easterlings are broken up into two tribes: the tribe of Bor and the tribe of Ulfang. These golden armored, beautiful lads here are the tribe of Ulfang, and both sub-factions are themed after like Eastern sort of nomads, these sort of peoples that would be Harad and Rune later, even though that's not really likely how it would have played out in the story. Just a creative decision that we made. So you're going to see these little keynote things here, a lot of assets from Third Age. These units are halberds, extremely powerful, and the Bor faction generally focuses on defensive weaponry, so scimitars, halberds, spearmen, and things like that, but they are very heavily armored, and they act kind of as the tanks for the Easterling faction. So you're going to see some scimitar units here, and they have this sort of Rajput look to them that is mixed with assets from Third Age. In the back here, you have the more custom stuff, which is made for the tribes of Ulfang, made by Skyly. And the Ulfang units specialize in attack. So the Bor units are kind of the shield and the holding units, whereas Ulfang's troops are more lightly armored, swifter, and deal far more damage, especially off the charge because of their unique weapon type here. We have the Falks. And let me take a look at chat here, and I will answer a few questions in just a few moments. I just want to get through this as quickly as possible. We're almost done. But the Falks is a little bit different from a two-handed sword. Swords tend to have higher melee defense. The Falks does not have any bonuses one way or the other. What they do have going for them is an extremely high charge value. So they get about 225% of the base damage of the weapon, that whatever the stats of the unit happen to be. If it's 10, then they end up with like 22 charge damage, which is incredibly high. They're also very quick, so they do favor like running in, smashing people up, running back out, and then charging back in again to get that extra value. If you manage to do that twice with a unit, you've probably paid for it many times over. But this is a high tier unit. This is some of the names are a little bit similar, and I do get confused with them sometimes, so I can only sympathize with people who are jumping into the mob. But I believe these guys are the Ravagers of Himring. They cause fear, they have huge charge damage, and they're a little bit more well armored. They're like the only medium unit that the tribe of Ulfang can field. Over here we have the bodyguard of Bor himself, based on the Kamul's Chosen model from 30s Reforged, with some new shield and shield models and textures that have been added into them, which I got from Sin of the Dark Club. They are an axe unit, and they are extremely deadly. They're a little bit smaller than other bodyguard units, but damn do they hit like trucks. But like most axe units, they are a little bit lower on the melee defense side of things, because that's just how axes work in Silmarillion. Oh no, we have some of the Marauders here getting shot to death. That's one thing that Ulfang does not do well, is stand up to arrow fire the way that the tribe of Bor will do. But here we have the eponymous unit for the tribe of Ulfang. These are the Sons of Ulfang. They are a Falks unit. Their charge is probably the highest in the game, I think, for anything. Any unit, infantry, cavalry, you pick, the charge of the Sons of Ulfang is going to be far more devastating. They're also armor-piercing, unlike most Falkses, and they are a bodyguard tier unit capped at 1. So they are quite expensive, and this model here was done custom for us by Skyly. But we're almost done here. So we have Angband, the big baddie. Angband as a faction tends to specialize in their heavy infantry. They have many armor upgrades, and most factions in the game don't, or they have them in an extremely limited way, and they're usually more expensive. Angband gets them for a little bit more often, but they're not as cheap as they are for the Sons of Feanor, but they do upgrade their attack more cheaply, in addition to having that extra defensive boost. So these are the Macemen here, the Guardians of the Iron Crown, I believe. The Iron Crown being a reference, of course, to Morgoth himself, and the headdress that he placed these stolen Silmarils into as sort of a symbol of his majesty. And some of these units actually have crowns here, which is why I chose to use them. This is actually the work of Cowering Coma, and you can find it in 30s Reforged as well. But they are Macemen, and they smash people like you wouldn't believe. They have about 10 armor, very, very tanky unit. One of the few truly high tier units that Angband has. Most of their roster is composed of the Iron Shods, and that is because in the novels, the orcs are described as being Iron Shod, so that's where the name comes from. That's where the concept for the faction comes from. Angband's weaknesses, however, tends to be their morale and their response to morale shocks, and also their weakness to AP and their lack of any true long-ranged options. So, if you were to crash into these units from behind, or kill their general, or heaven forbid both, you can melt an Angband army very, very quickly. So their weakness is being able to smash their lines with relative ease if you can get good engagements. But they do have some really scary things going for them, such as their large units. Don't think we have any on the field today. Doesn't look like it. But they do have access to Uruloki, so the dragons, they're not flying dragons, but they're sort of land-bound fire worms, and we use the Botet Hydra model for that. And they spit fire and can just be devastating to medium and light infantry. They also have the Balrogs, the Valoralkar, who are extremely, extremely potent. You'll get about 3 of them in the unit. They're an elephant-class unit, so they do attack in a radius in front of them, which can be very scary. And you're also going to see a lot of halberd units and heavily armored orcs from Angband. So you see both the base here, the unit out in front with the sword and shield, is the Iron Shod Legionnaires. That's their base version. When you upgrade them, they're going to turn into this kind of spiky, cone-headed thing, which is very, very intimidating. And that's their armor upgrade look that was made for us again by Skyly. So a pretty heavily armored front line here. You're also going to see some shock units and the Bulldogs. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what exactly a Bulldog is, basic idea is that it comes from the notes of Tolkien, and they are a Maiar, so a spirit sort of on the same, I guess, astral and power tier of Gandalf or Balrogs, but not as powerful generally. And they've been forced to inhabit the body of a monstrous orc chieftain. And they're sort of tormented in this form, as the Maiar tend to be very fluid, and they take different forms, and so I imagine being stuck in one can be quite an agony for them. And to sort of hammer that home, you can see there's some racks here that have been these very cruel spiked iron racks with some dwarf heads that have been riveted into the flesh of their back, leaving them in constant agony. And they vent their frustration of being bound to this physical form and to the pain they suffer upon the backs of their enemies. And this model was made by Castellan of Angmar and is unique to our mod, and it is fantastic. It reminds me a lot of I can't remember his name. It's a particular villain from a novel series of Warhammer 40k. And then in the back here, we have the sort of spear-armored counterpart to the Guardians of the Iron Crown. These are the appropriately named Spear Guard of the Iron Crown. They can upgrade their armor unlike the Guardians, and so they are extra tanky, and unlike any other Angband spear unit, these guys can actually form shield wall. They are trained enough to do so, and they can be used to smash through enemy lines. Got some crossbows up here as well. Angband is currently the only faction that has access to crossbows, but the dwarves will eventually have that as well. And then we have some wretches. The lowest of the low, as their name would imply. Wretches are just like light spearmen. They're there to die. They're cheap. You can bring them in large numbers, and they make a fantastic cavalry screen, because one of the things that Angband doesn't do well is, of course, their cavalry. They do have access to some warg units, but their warg units are kind of not great. But it is an option for them if they so choose. Oh, we have some more Easterlings over here. What do you know? We have the Salamandrine Guard. The helmet was done for us by Castellan of Angmar again. And the body, I believe, comes from Risichi Total War. It's like a Mongol kind of body. And then we just use like the standard sort of Haradrim horse here. But for the Easterlings, they are a hybrid unit. They are expensive, low in number, far lower than other elven cavalry even. But these are, of course, humans, and they specialize in hunting monsters. They're armor-piercing, and they have a special fiery projectile that allows them to hunt dragons and other fearsome creatures for which they are named, the Salamandrine Guard. You can bring 2 of them, you can upgrade their armor and their attack as well. Got some Sons of Wolfang there, and some more Falx units. I think that's pretty well it. So while we wait for things to really kick off here, that might not be too long, because we do have sort of a sally forward here by the Easterlings under Alexander into the Tolin Gaudaroth army. I want to take a moment here and go through the chat and see if I missed anything else. Jordan, can I play the next one? If you're in our testing crew, then you absolutely can. Just today we're showing off because we've officially started development up again after the release of the Fall of Feanor patch. We're just playing around on our test build. So if you have access to the testing build, then you can absolutely jump in. If you're interested in kind of joining the testers and helping us move forward with development, then you can always send me a message on Discord and we can kind of talk about that and like the responsibilities and the expectations, etc., etc. Ooh, so that little orange ribbon here, that's the split shot projectile at work, so that you'll be able to identify that from basically any distance when that thing is coming your way. You know you're getting shot with split shot, and you should maybe consider not doing that. So a sally here from the Easterlings. And they're getting just raked here with the split shot, but the House of Boar is going to be able to stand up to that pretty well. They do have a base armor value of 8, and a lot of their units are shielded. So arrows in Silmarillion tend to be a little bit lower in damage than if you're used to 3H Reforged and you know how their bows operate, and etc., etc. Then our arrows are going to be a little bit lower than that, and that's to encourage like positional play and things like that. But it is somewhat mitigated by the fact that armor values are lower. You have an initial clash here between some Hishbukraz Howlers. These are locked morale fanatics. They are relentless. However, they lose to basically everything. The idea here is that they're a tar pit, and you know maybe you'll get some decent kills off of them if you're lucky. But you can never get rid of them until you've slain every single last member of their unit. So they can be used in frontal attacks like this to bog your enemies down. You can see some Longfangs moving up to try and capitalize upon the blob that the Hishbukraz Howlers are being used to create. At the same time, have some Easterling infantry here pushing up the hill against the Scarahai Longfangs. They're probably predating upon the halberds. That would definitely be the best idea. Let's go ahead and turn my music up just a little bit here. This moment certainly warrants it. A general attack here. Angband has now joined the fray alongside the Easterlings. Tolin Gauderhoth rebelling against their master in the north. They've joined forces with the Noldor of Hithlum of all people. More and more of those throwing axes are being tossed downhill here. Trying to sort of inflict a maximum amount of casualties given how blobbed up the Angband and the Easterling infantry are in this case. Oh man, that's some serious lag. Nothing else going on over here. More Easterling units being brought forward to try and silence the Longfangs. We're getting a point-blank volley here off into those poor halberds. And they'll do okay. Some of them will get back up again. And now those Longfangs are going to be silenced, but it's a 9 damage projectile impacting into 8 armor. So there's a decent chance there to slay one of them outright. Thunder's Fox coming over the hill with much of his reserves here. And the House of Finarfin under Delaramur moving forward against Arnoediad. This is a pretty tough matchup. Delaramur is definitely newer at the mod, and Celtic is quite an experienced multiplayer person. However, House of Finarfin is a good beginning faction if you're a little bit unsure and you just kind of want to play it safe. So Delaramur at least has that going for him. It's not going to be a complete slaughter. They are quite potent from the front. Looks like he's going to get a little bit of support here from the Wolves of Tolin Gauderhoth. Have some Wolfguard charging the field. They're probably going to get stopped by those spearmen, but they will smash their way through those spears. And of course, over here, the lightly armored nature of the Green Elves is not going to be much protection against even the low-tier arrows of the Hishbukraz hunters. A little bit of chaos in the back here. Delaramur switching some of his Nargothrond marksmen to the other front, and let's see how they're managing to hold out here. Ooh, the House of Fingolfin is going to hold pretty well from the front. I would say that in many cases they would be able to beat Angband, but Tolin Gauderhoth is kind of the weak point in this link here that could collapse the whole line. Let's see, projectiles being traded overhead from both sides. Those Ashclaw hunters opening fire onto some reserves from the Easterlings that pour forth down the hill. Many of the Ulfang Easterlings charging forward, looking to maybe exploit some of the small gaps in the line, and they're going to be supported by some Ents as well. And that's sort of like a fantasy clusterfuck a little bit, with factions not exactly divided along their canonical allegiances, but it's still just fun. What do we got here? Wolfguard squaring off alongside Sauron against the Easterlings of Bor. Sauron leading from the front here, smashing apart those men of the East. Have some Ents being brought in to counter him, along with a few manpower reserves here. Still some Salamandrine Guard and some other nasty things here in reserve, but it looks like Angband under Butcher has gone full balls to the wall here against the House of Finarfin, and the pikes do outrange the halberds. It's one of the distinctions that we do make in the mod, is the longer the stick, the greater distance you can attack from. It's fairly intuitive in that way. But Angband doesn't really have a direct answer in a frontal engagement like this to those Sentries of Hithlum. So, over time, they may get worn down, or the halberds and their high armor values may be enough to kind of weather that storm and see them through. Got some cavalry here from Melkon smashing into the Spear Guard. Probably not the best place for this cavalry to be. Realm of Angband under the Butcher bringing in some two-handed axes as surety against those cavalry, as in an exchange, the two-handed axemen can actually trade very, very well. Speaking of two-handed axemen, we're about to see a little bit of a duel here. Herdsmen of Hithlum entering the fray, trying to keep the Fingolfin left wing, rather, from collapsing completely. I think there's some low-tier Ferdsmen of Dorlom and some low-end spearmen from the House of Hador that are waiting in reserve, but this is not looking great for them. We have some Harumatar. Yeah, these would be the Harumatar. The two-handed version of the Armatar, and a shield wall push here from Angband is going to see them through that Fingolfin line. I don't know if they can stop them without some help from their allies. What do we have over here? Oh no, Sons of Ulfang. Oh dear. Sons of Ulfang being targeted by the Marksmen of Nargothrond. That is bad news bears for them. They are the heaviest of the Ulfang units, but that's not really saying much. Over here, Tulin Gaudahoth and I think Finarfin has maybe joined the fray as well. I could be mistaken. Ents here, creating just a pile of corpses on top of this hill. Now these would be a really good answer to them. The Arqueni Morn Megilloa, the Knights of the Black Sword, are potent against not just dragons, but all elephant units. If they're tossed in here against those Ents, they can be a pretty scary prospect indeed. And that's the same can be said here of these spearmen. They're armor piercing and they have bonuses against mounts. So that'll be a nice thing to have against those Ents there. Looks like we got a sally forward here from some of the medium armored mid-tier units from the House of Finarfin. We have the Swordsmen of Talathirnin. They're going to toss their javies, and despite the fact that they lack that armor-piercing trait, nonetheless, the lightly armored nature of the Green Elves is going to be very, very poor protection against those missiles. So we'll come back here in just a moment and see how things end up playing out. But it appears that Tulin Gaudahoth in the center here really not having a good time, so now House of Finarfin is going to join the fray there with some reserve units, hopefully manage to shore up their line. Sons of Ulfang, I can definitely see them down there. Oh no, that's not them. They're in here somewhere. Sauron, hanging out, doing his thing. This is fine. This is totally fine. Yeah. These Sauron animations are going to need a little bit of work. Hopefully it's something we can fix in the future. I think it just needs to be kind of redirected a little bit and start to turn around in just a few moments. Tulin Gaudahoth beginning to collapse here. House Fingolfin, however, is holding the line very admirably. But their fate is certainly sealed here. And the Edain pikes, however, are not really made of the same kind of stern stuff as those elite Noldor swordsmen, and this could cause the House of Fingolfin line to completely collapse here. Ooh, that's painful. You have some units that may be routed, now reformed, so there are some Edain manpower reserves here, but I think probably the better thing to do would be to gather these units as they come back from routing, if they do, and then fall back to the Fingolfin side of things and try and shore up the line and maybe make some sort of last stand. Maybe start to win here in the center, and it looks like Tulin Gaudahoth is having a lot of success in that regard. In front here we have Mythern and Tolgalen, or not Mythern, Urfin and Tower, who've joined the fray, and they're going to crush these mid-tier swords. These are like high-tier axemen. Looks like they got their charge off as well. It's not looking great. They're not going to have a chance to toss anything, and then another unit of the Orphan is going to be brought from reserve, and it's going to get their claws sunk deep into this unit of mid-tier swords. And there is still substantial manpower reserves here from the House of Finarfin, but all that strength is currently being drawn off to try and weather this assault here from Angband. I don't know what just happened here. I think that's probably the Ash Priests at work, tossing their fiery projectiles, which predictably explode in a hail of ash that is blinding and choking and damaging to enemy morale. They're actually tossing right into the rear of this Easterling bodyguard. If they can assassinate the Easterlings, they might just be able to collapse Alexander's entire line. And you can see those Ash Priests there go toe-to-toe with the Boar's bodyguard. Ash Priests, very, very potent. They are relentless, 3 HP, however, somewhat balanced out by the fact that they are low in number, expensive, and very, very lightly armored. It is entirely possible to kill this unit before it ever gets into close quarters by simply focusing it with 2 or 3 archer units. But if you're not able to do that, and they're able to sort of get the upper hand this way, then the Ash Priest can be extremely hard to get rid of. Got Sauron hanging out down here. Sauron's gonna smash his way through more of these Easterlings. Oof. Yeah, the Sons of Ulfang definitely felt that. Let's pop on over here, and it looks like Fingolfin has been smashed at great cost to both sides from the look of things. And now, Silmarillion cavalry, some of these sentries of Gelion, lightly armored mounted skirmishers are going to charge through that gap in the line, and the Easterlings here with their Salamandrine guard trying to fight some sort of rear guard action, maybe give their ally a chance to reform and save some of his infantrymen. This is a pretty healthy unit here. We might just see them come back. I would be surprised if we didn't, but unfortunately it's maybe a little bit of a vain gesture. Actually, hold on. No, they're on the opposite team. They're just murdering these people. Oh no. Yeah, we're not going to see any of these reserves come back. It would appear. Sartor and Narada are going to be able to weather this firestorm like nobody's business. High armor, able to upgrade their armor, and high shield value coupled with 2 HP makes them absolute tanks. And now the House of Finarfin has turned to meet the advance of both Angband and the Easterlings, but Assyrian has now come and occupied their previous position, and I think we're going to see the House of Finarfin just kind of get sandwiched here. Now, in a straight fight, I would say that they could probably take the tattered remnants of Angband and these Easterlings, but not with so many green elves just behind them, taking big bites out of them. But this is certainly going to be an epic last stand. Looks like some Ishbulkraz warband, their locked morale, have been brought forward to block this unit of Hunters of Assyrian to prevent them from tossing their jabbies at close quarters into these spearmen here, these Wardens of Nargothrond. They're going to take that brief reprieve as an opportunity to launch a frontal assault here, and you're going to see some of the Tolin Gaudahoth forces as well. These are some of the Chosen, the Gijak Skada's Chosen. They're going to smash into those infantry lines, but Celtic is going to draw them back. He's going to bring forward his infantry reserves, and now these Chosen are going to be in very, very tough spots indeed. Over here, Wardens and Urfin clashing 1-to-1. This battlefield is just degenerated into chaos. There is no semblance of order in anyone's formation anymore. The Urfin are going to be joined, I believe? Nope, just by more Urfin. Alright, well, that's not looking great. Marksman here, maybe managing to squeeze off a couple extra shots at those lightly armored green elves. If they were allowed to fire forever, they could have wreaked some serious, serious vengeance upon the lightly armored Lyquendi. But the wretches have been brought forward, and they're going to smash into those marksmen. The marksmen are capable combatants, but the wretches just have too much numbers, and there's just too much going in favor of, I don't even know who to call them. They're both the red team. Well, let's call them the opposing team. There's too much going in favor of the opposing team, and I think that the Elven Orcish Alliance are not long for this world. Bulldogs have now been brought forth as well, and this Finarfin line, normally so formidable if given the time to do its work, is going to get slowly crushed. Arqueni Mor Magilwa charging into the flank of these treacherous Easterlings. Do we still have any Ash Priests up here? Did he lose his bodyguard? These Finarfin heavy spearmen are actually going to be forced to flee the battlefield here. Shameful display while these lowly orcs are willing to stand and fight. Look at this, just Hamburger Hill up here. Total nightmare for both sides. And now the noose is being tightened, and Finarfin and the remnants of the Tolian Gaudahoth army are making their last stand. Oh, devastating. Very, very painful. It was a fun battle to watch, certainly. Not the closest, I would say. There's a lot of Arnoediad left, and like mostly these red units are... Ooh, some downhill charge here into the rear of that Finarfin pike wall, trying to break it up. Not a close battle by any means, but nonetheless a glorious spectacle. Sometimes that's all. Now everything is going to collapse on the final tiny struggling pockets of Finarfin resistance. That's going to be game over there. But let's just look at the scale of this conflict all along this line here. House of Fingolfin put up a valiant struggle. Tolian Gaudahoth did their best. I didn't really see too much from their cavalry in this fight, but then I was, kind of gabbing away at other things. Oh, we do have some warlords still in the fray. But their infantry really suffered heavily going toe-to-toe with the Easterlings, as you would expect. I think the Easterlings of the three factions probably got it the worst, Angband coming in second, and Arnoediad seems relatively untouched, but they've definitely used a lot of their ammunition to get to this point. Yeah, you really can't beat Medieval 2 for like the scale of its combat, so I'm going to go ahead and admit defeat here.
Our general shames us all. He flees battle while his soldiers still fight.
And that should be it. I didn't really see too much from the Arqueni Vindicano, but it's possible that I'll go back and do this as a replay just because it's fun. And maybe we'll get a little bit more in-depth coverage there. But I did really want to kind of present the factions and their lore and the various ways that we're trying to be true to the story and be detail-oriented. There we go. Beautiful. Take a look at the kills there. Melkon, unfortunately, was only able to get about 1,000 or so kills. Delramore, about the same. Tundra's Fox did reasonably well as Tolian Gaudahoth. He had his work really cut out for him, though, didn't he? And everyone else, pulling ahead with, 5 to 300 or so extra kills. Yeah, not the closest game in the world, but still, damn fun to watch. Two v 2 Nalrog, if you can manage it without suffering. It's getting a little bit later in the day for me today, so I might kind of finish off the stream there, because I do have some other things to do before I go camping this weekend. So, I won't have time to do it next, but I will have a video or a stream that does feature it eventually. So you have my word on that we will get around to it. We just had a crash today when we tried it, and we'd been sitting in the lobby for a million years, so we just wanted to just get into a game and just have some fun. Are the axes from the Longfangs AP? Nope, neither in close quarters or in melee. Throwing axes differ from javelins in the mod in a few key ways. One, they can destroy siege weapons, so if you toss into the front of a catapult unit that's trying to hide behind catapults, or maybe even using them as a battering ram to break up your lines, then you can basically evaporate those things almost instantaneously, or destroy units that are already wounded and limping. Their projectiles also bounce. So if they hit the ground, then they can bounce and hit someone else. If they don't hit them directly, you can bounce them off of surfaces and things like that. They have a little bit lower range overall than javelins, whereas javelins, on dedicated skirmishers at least, are armor piercing, higher range, but a little bit less ammo than throwing axes. Throwing axes generally have about 3 or 4 ammo depending on the unit, whereas javelin skirmishers on the top end have 3. But that's the AP at work there. Just can be very, very strong. But you need to use more than one javelin unit if you want to wipe out a unit entirely. That's by design. Let's see if I missed anything else here before I sign off for the day. Or if you guys have any other additional questions or you want to know about the mods, I will put the details of our mod DB and our Discord into the chat here as well if you guys want to come and join us and get involved in some community events, or take advantage of the Halloween asset pack that will be available this month. Yeah, that can be a tough one. The thing that you can do in that sort of situation is just wait it out, because as the House of Finarfin, you've got good shield, you've got good armor, you've got really, really heavily armored pikemen and spearmen and things like that. You can just wait out Assyrians. And that keeps them out of the fight, and then you can shuffle resources to the other end to try and swing things in your favor. That's probably what I would have done in that sort of situation. If I'm only bringing 2 units of marksmen, I'm probably not going to use them on Assyrian. I'll use them on big gangbang blobs. But you can also bring some mainline archers, some medium tier archers of Talathirnin, if you needed to have that extra skirmish. And there's also the scouts of Talon Faurath, who are a 2-handed spear / poison arrow unit. But yeah, that's pretty well it for me for today. I want to thank everybody who came out and played with us, and who was behind the games that I got to spectate and take the time to kind of show off the various features of the mod. I want to thank them for coming out and playing with us. I like to think that we all had fun, even if some of the games weren't the closest. And let me just put one other link here in the description for you. And this is going to take you to our Discord server. Who's modeling the dwarves? Probably a bunch of different people. Bill Baraka has offered us some of his... I actually don't mind saying this now because he's previewed them already. But he's offered us some of his... it's like a dwarf tribe. I can never remember their name. He's offered us some of the work that he's done there, and they're very scary, and they have these terrifying bronze masks which you would associate with the dwarves, and which will actually be reflected on the battle map as causing fear. And there will be other stuff as well. Skyly has offered us some of his dwarves of the Blue Mountains pack. We will also be using some of Koma's work, which he's given us permission to use, from Ered Luin whenever they are finished. So it's going to be a little bit for the dwarves, but we will have Gondolin and the Haladin coming to you next, probably in that order. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys have enjoyed this preview of the mod. Hope you're excited to see where development goes from here to the unforeseen future.